We have the final AP and the final CFP polls. BYU represented. Utah, sadly, was not. No surprise there. Some Big 12 teams in the final AP and the final CFP poll. And then we'll do a little look ahead with the way too early top 25 polls that are out. It's probably hard to expect Utah being ranked. I don't think that's breaking news. BYU will probably be a top 20 team, somewhere maybe 15 through 20. They came in at number 13 in the AP, number 17 in the CFP poll. So do some college football on the show today. Yesterday, talking about the game last night, I wondered aloud if Notre Dame could make it a fair fight, and I'm not sure that they did. They punched back there at the end. They were nearly able to cover the spread, and there were a couple of, as they say in soccer, hearts and mouths moments if you're an Ohio State fan, but ultimately it didn't feel like Ohio State was ever really in danger after they countered that first big Notre Dame drive with just boom, 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 3 straight drives with touchdowns. So we'll do some college football on the program today. The Utah Jazz took a historic L last night against the New Orleans Pelicans. It was the biggest comeback in Pelicans history, and it's just great news. Such great news. So we'll do some NBA. We'll do some Jazz on the program today. Mainly college football, a little NFL as well. Ben Johnson to Chicago. What's next in New York? AFC, NFC championship games coming up during conference championship weekend on Sunday of this week, and we'll have the games on this radio station. BYU basketball, kind of a sneaky big one tonight at Colorado. Colorado has not won a Big 12 game, and BYU, I'll say this is kind of a must-win ultimately for BYU because they have not won a road game. They're 2-4 in Big 12 play. In case you missed it, the Utah men's basketball game was moved to tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So we have a very short show here in the afternoon tomorrow to make way for some Utah basketball in the program. So a lot to do on the show. Good guest list. Get you guys through this chilly Tuesday afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. We'll start things off today with Roxy Bernstein. Now, Roxy, one of our favorites from the Pac-12 network. He has a beef with Courtney Cox. It's a real thing. It's a bit I can't let go. We'll do some college football with Roxy, but he was in town on Saturday to call the Utah-BYU basketball game, and I saw him from a distance, couldn't make it down to say hello. And so when I saw that he was doing the game, reached out to Porter to get him on, and so we were able to do that today. Matt Brown, our buddy from Extra Points, who was on the ground in Atlanta for the CFP final. So we'll see how that was for him and his thoughts on the current state of college football, and we'll go from there as far as Matt coming on the 3 o'clock hour. Jim Jeffries, stand-up comic. If you're a fan of this show, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you know that our buddy Keith Stubbs and Wise Guys Comedy, we always reach out to them to say if anybody's rolling through, we'd love to get to know them. We've had a bunch of big-time stand-up comics on the program. Michael Rappaport in studio. We keep going down the list. Obviously, J.L. Covan has become a friend of the show. I'm a big Jim Jeffries fan. His stand-up comedy is not necessarily sports talk radio friendly. So we'll see if we can get weird with Jim, but not lose the show. Coming up at 4 o'clock. Then Mike Sanford Jr., former college football player and coach, will stop by to do a little more college football. Mostly college football on the show today with a skosh of college hoops, some NBA, Utah Hockey Club as well. So we'll get to as much as we possibly can on the program today with Roxy Bernstein, with Matt Brown, with Jim Jeffries, with Mike Stanford Jr., me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, on a Tuesday. And that guy, Porter Larson, produces the show. All right. Did Notre Dame make that a fair fight?
I mean, not really. Not really a fair fight. They, as you said, they threw a few punches, and that came in the form of literally a punch out late in the game that gave them the ball and an 8-point deficit. They had a one possession game late in that matchup, right? So you have to give them credit for making a game of it, making it, not a blowout, but early on it did look like it was going to be that way, Spence. And I don't know that I ever really felt like the result was in doubt once Ohio State really, really got going. And, credit to them, man. They played really, really well on a college football championship Monday.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. So let's get to it. Our first guest will be Roxy Bernstein. But before Roxy rolls by, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too, at Standard Restaurant Supply. It's your one-stop shop for all of your tailgate needs, either online or their convenient location here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. It is time now for your opening tip. So the first 12-team expanded CFP playoff format culminated last night in Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Dome. It's Ohio State take care of Notre Dame 34-23. Really wasn't that close. Ohio State responded to that great initial drive from Notre Dame. Notre Dame came out of the gates and did exactly what most people thought they had to do. Start quickly, but control the clock and keep Ohio State off the field. And it was like a super long drive to start out the game that ended up in a touchdown, and kind of looking around going, okay, well, maybe Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish can make this thing interesting. The Ohio State response was just perfect. Boom, boom, boom. 3 possessions, all touchdowns. And they were not big hits. They were simply long, sustained drives that allowed the Buckeyes, in my opinion, to basically put this thing away at halftime. As we talked about yesterday, Notre Dame is not built to come back. Once they go down by a couple of scores, it's just tough to picture them coming back. They're just not a high-powered offensive team, although Riley Leonard, I thought last night, showed some things potentially that not a lot of people had seen this year because they are a classic Notre Dame, great defensive front, slow down the game and run the football with their quarterback mostly. And last night we didn't see any of Jeremiah Love, surprising a lot of people. It was really Riley Leonard, and that's about it. Notre Dame did throw some punches late to make it somewhat interesting. It was an 11-point win for Ohio State. The spread ended up being 8.5, so Ohio State won and they covered. And, the ride of Ryan Day certainly is something that has to be talked about. This was a guy who, as little as like 3 weeks ago, there seemed to be a lot of conversation about whether or not he was going to keep that job, which is wild to me when you think about where he is at now on the pantheon of college football coaches. One of 3 current coaches to win a national championship, a better win percentage than Jim Tressel, the sweater vest bro, and a better S&P index than Urban Meyer. I mean, he's the 5th Ohio State coach to win a national championship, and he's one of the top 3 all-time in win percentage, period, in college football. It is the power of not being able to beat your rival. And I talked about this with Sean, like Coach Witt spanked Bronco more often than not. Like Bronco Mendenhall had a tough time beating Utah. It's not like he never did it, but because Bronco, 10-win seasons, bringing BYU football back to respectability after Gary Croton left behind what was a cleanup job after a Led Zeppelin party. I didn't think Bronco was ever in danger of losing that job. He ended up leaving on his own accord. And I get losing to Michigan 4 straight times, but ultimately Ohio State, in my opinion, showed people that when they were playing top shelf, they were the best team in college football. Yes, apparently a $25 million or so payroll can help, but this run through the CFP, they had a tough route, and they ended up essentially, in my opinion, not really being challenged. Smoked Tennessee, smoked Oregon, the team that stayed clean during the regular season. They had a couple of self-inflicted wounds that allowed that Texas game to be closer than I thought it should have been. And like I said, I felt like that game last night was basically over at halftime. So congratulations, Ohio State. And some interesting things about the way that they have built this roster. I mean, the attention is on that $20 to $25 million price tag for this group. But ultimately, the majority of that money went to the players that they had on the roster already. For the most part. Not everybody. Obviously, they brought in a couple of very talented safety. They had a safety that they brought in via the transfer portal, that unbelievable freshman wide receiver. They bring in a quarterback via the transfer portal. But essentially, in the trenches, on defense, these are players that have played in Ohio State for a long, long time, recruited out of high school, and then came through and played. Some of them played more than 50 college football games. And so that's kind of good news when you look at it through the prism of the Utes, who have their entire offensive line back. A defense that nobody's going to question, even with a couple of really big-time players taken off in Keanu Tanavasa and Cameron Calhoun. Means there's a lot of pressure on Devin Dampier, who Jason Beck essentially said is the starting quarterback on this show a week ago. We'll do some more of this throughout the course of the show, but we'll catch a quick break to start things off on a Tuesday. Our first guest on the other side is the great Roxy Bernstein. So more college football. Then Roxy was in town to call that Utah BYU basketball game on Saturday. We'll get with him about that coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. for Junior will roll by as well to talk some college football. But on this radio show, the Rembrandts are saved for one person and one person only. Of course, I'll be there for you. The theme song of the horrible, horrible television show back in the 90s called Friends. It means it's time for Roxy Bernstein. You guys know that by now. Roxy on a Tuesday. Sir, how are you?
I will be there for you, Spence. Can't say that I'd be there for Courtney Cox, but I would be there for you.
Now, we don't need to make it weird on a Tuesday. I know when you hear the name Courtney Cox, your ears get red. You start feeling.
Cringe.
Yeah, I know.
I cringe.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, enough time has passed. That was a dumb show. It was a bad TV show that co-opted the thoughts of people that just are simpletons that didn't like a intellectual television show like Seinfeld, if we're honest.
Actually, the show was pretty good. I can get past the personal issues.
Oh, fine. Well, I was trying to have your back. Never mind. Awesome show. How you been, man? Thank you for the time as always.
I'm good. You know, I was in town over the weekend. I had that overtime thriller up at the Huntsman Center, and I'm on my Utah week with that game Saturday. I have BYU tonight. I'm in Boulder for the game against the Buffaloes. Thursday, I have the Utah Hockey Club for ESPN against Minnesota. And then I'm back in your great state on Saturday. I'm double dipping. I have the Utah women against BYU women down in Provo. And then the nightcap, I'm double dipping on Saturday with Cincinnati against BYU.
Wow. Well, never a dull moment. Yeah. And Roxy Bernstein, the unofficial voice of Utah sports. I love it. Well, I was at the Huntsman Center on Saturday night, and I looked down. I had some pretty good seats. I was about 5 rows behind you, but I did not have my credential, and I'm not going to be the dude that says, "Don't you know who I am?" So I could not come down and say hello. But when I saw that you were on the call, say again, sorry.
You could have been.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean,
and I would
come
have
on.
said, "Yeah, I know him."
Yeah, but Roxy, I'm already unlikable enough on paper. Like I'm well aware of how unlikable I am on paper. So I don't want to, I don't want to further the narrative. So I simply texted Porter. I said, let's get our guy. And I wanted to start with Saturday night. And as you know, I was a student at Utah in the late 90s when their head coach was named Rick Majerus. And our weeks were planned around Utah basketball games when I was a student there. And I'll say, and look, Larry Kraskowiak had a couple of good teams. Jim Boylan had an NCAA team. I'm not saying the building hasn't had one night like that in 27 years or whatever, but it really did feel like an atmosphere that reminded me of when I was watching Andre Miller and Keith Van Horn and Mike Doliak and Britton Johnson. So let's start with the environment. You travel all over the place for a college basketball game to kind of feel and sound like that at the Huntsman Center is kind of warm in my heart. What did you make of that crowd?
Well, as you know, over the years, I have done a ton of games at the Huntsman Center. And I don't think I've had a more energetic, boisterous crowd that was into it from even before the game started, like we had Saturday night. That was an electric atmosphere. And I've done BYU Utah games there in Salt Lake City before and in Provo. And that was just a tremendous atmosphere for college basketball. And it was great to see. And the Utah fans got rewarded with that overtime win and a huge W for Craig Smith and his program. But it was great to see that again. I've seen good crowds and full houses at the Huntsman Center before. But of all the games I've been to, they're up at the Huntsman Center. That was probably the best in terms of atmosphere and fan engagement that I've seen probably in all the years I've been going to games at the University of Utah.
I agree, and it was a lot of fun. And there were a good number of BYU fans, but not as many as I thought, because the rumors prior to the game was BYU fans were going to grab all the secondary market tickets in the upper bowl, and because Utah fans at times don't fill that lower bowl, there was going to be a lot of blue. There was some, not a ton. But let's get into the game, and I'll tell you what, Roxy, like to start the season when we're doing kind of a little preseason stuff to preview the Big 12 schedule, I looked at January 18th, BYU here in Salt Lake, and I'm like, well, that's probably going to be an ass kicking. And I don't know if anybody would argue that Craig has near the talent that Kevin does. I mean, reports are Yegor Demin is a 7-figure NIL kid. And last Jonathan Givony mock I looked at, he was number 7 off the board. Cannon Catchings is also supposed to be a first-round prospect, although I don't really see it with him just yet. But I don't feel like Craig has near the talent Kevin did. And certainly home court advantage helps. And, had a couple of performances from some players that were, quite frankly, things we hadn't seen before. But what stood out most to you about the way the game played out that allowed Utah to get that win in overtime?
Well, first off, I expected a little bit more free-flowing offense, and it didn't really come to fruition Saturday night. With the way Utah have been playing this year, second in the country in assists, Spence, the ball has been whipping and moving around for the Utes this year. And it didn't really happen, probably because BYU, I think, had it well scouted, and they do certain things. So I think they took that aspect away and tried to limit the movement. And it was a physical battle between the two, which I did anticipate just because of the rivalry. And that was the one thing. I thought we'd get a score in the 80s. We did. It was overtime in the low 70s. But it was a fierce competitive battle from the outset. And I was really impressed with the toughness that really both teams showed. And Utah trying to defend the home floor. The crowd certainly was into it with Keba Keita playing on the other side after starting for Utah. And it was really just an intense game from the outset. That's the one thing that really stood out to me, is just how locked in both teams were and how physically intense this game was.
I imagine you had a chance to catch up with Craig before the game, yeah?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I saw out there shoot around. In fact, I was talking to him for about 5 minutes, about 20 minutes before tip over in the hallway. So, yeah, I have had a great relationship with Craig going back to his days at Utah State.
So he's like the best dude, as you know, and I'm pulling hard for him. His son, Bountiful alum, Roxy, I know you don't have time, but when you have time later, you can look up the 1997 Bountiful Braves basketball team that won state. People around here believe it's the best high school team in the history. I don't say that, even though I may have been on the team, but I don't say that. It's not me. And so his son played for the same high school coach I did, so I used to run into him at some of those games, and I pull for him, and I felt so happy for him with this win. And he's had good wins in the past. They had a win over Oregon, and so we're hoping ultimately this is not only a moment in time. But can you shed a little light on some of the portions of your conversations with him and his thoughts on this group and what they could potentially do this year?
First off, as you know, when you talk to him, Spence, he's always upbeat. Yep. He's always positive. And the way he looks at things, gets so much energy, and it's infectious. And I think his team feels that every time that they're on the practice floor, they're on the floor for shoot-around, getting ready for games in the locker room. He gets them going, and they feed off it. And you're right, they don't have the talent that BYU does. But Craig finds a way to get the most out of his talent and utilize the pieces. And the other thing about Craig is he recruits that style that he wants to play with the ball movement. Yes, Gabe Madsen is a great shooter from the outside, is going through a little bit of a funk right now, but he's also a willing passer. Lawson Lovering at center is a center that's averaging 2.5 assists a game. It's a style that he recruits to, and he wants to play. And to me, it's an aesthetically pleasing style to watch because of the ball movement and how free-flowing they go, and they shoot threes. And he's excited. Look, they know this transition's not going to be easy. The last 10 years, I don't think anybody will give you the argument that the Big 12 has been the best league in the country. This year it's not. The SEC has shown that they are the best basketball league so far this year. But I think the Big 12 is right behind it, to be honest with you. With the way this league is balanced, you look at teams like Iowa State, Kansas, Baylor, after a rough opening to the season, has come on. There's a lot of really good basketball. Arizona's figured things out. And it makes it challenging when you're in this league. And Houston's, to me, a legitimate Final Four team. And that's now the competition level which Utah needs to embrace. And I think they have. And they stack up physically. When you look at them, they look the part. And on Saturday night, it was a challenge to go up against BYU. They were on their home floor, and it seemed the emphasis in the second half was be physical, go inside. And that's where they took this game from BYU, was the physicality that Ezra Asor played with and Lawson Lover, and the way they were able to attack BYU on the interior.
So I saw Craig on the sidelines of the Utah-BYU football game, and he was there to kind of do the basketball coach thing. It's like, hey, while you're all here, come see us play. And he told me about Ezra. at the game, and he said, they were really excited about him. East Carolina transfer, and he's had some personal stuff. Craig alluded to it after the game. He went home after the death of his grandmother. And I got to say, Roxy, you're old enough to remember, because I made this reference, and I think most young listeners are probably looking at me with 8 heads. There's like a little Adrian Dantley to this kid's game, because he's not 6'8", Roxy. He's not. Okay, he's listed at 6'8". He's like 6'5", 6'6". But the myriad of pump fakes, the ability to finish with both hands. He's a better athlete than AD was, because he'll knock on your head, but finishes with the right hand, finishes with the left hand. And Kevin threw everybody at him. He threw Fus Traore at him. He threw Keba Kate at him. And it didn't matter who was guarding Ezra Asar. He just got whatever he wanted. And I didn't know he had that in him. And I know he had a nice game against TCU, but that was next level. What are your thoughts on what you saw from Ezra?
It seemed like he was a different player in the second half Saturday night, maybe because the emphasis to get him the basketball, but he was unstoppable. And he went to town. BYU knew what he was going to do, and they couldn't stop him. And every shot was either right at the rim or within 5 feet. And it's not like he's stepping on the perimeter and nailing threes or even hitting the mid-range jumper. It was all attack, attack, attack. And he's got that to his game, that toughness, strength. And a nice compliment to Lawson Lovering, who isn't really your low-post big man. He's more of a face-up and looking to pass and facilitate, where Ezra just completely took this game over in the second half. 2 points at halftime was a non-factor for the most part in the first half, but certainly in the second half and in overtime, it was a point of emphasis. Then they had to sweat it out with all the free throws they missed down the stretch. And that's one thing that concerns me going forward, Spence, is their struggles at the foul line. And guys like Lovering, Ezra, who have the ball a lot and are attacking, get to the line a lot, but they miss a lot of free throws, and it became shaky down the stretch for Utah.
So before we get over to BYU, because I do have some questions about Kevin's team, I was really happy for Hunter Erickson, who is a BYU transfer. And it's fun. You mentioned Gabe and his shooting struggles. I will say this. I thought BYU did a remarkable job on Gabe. They started with Mawot Mag on him. Richie Saunders chased him around for a while. Dawson Baker chased him around for a while. But every single screen he came off of, BYU was ready. They blitzed him. They sent 2. So he just didn't have a lot of space. And he's the type of shooter like Steve Kerr, and before people get crazy, I'm not saying Gabe Matson, Steph Curry. Everybody calm down. But Steve Kerr always talks about, I want Steph to take 5 or 6 horrible shots a game, because when he gets going, it's unstoppable. And when Gabe gets going, he's one of the elite shooters in this conference. So I'm fine at times with a fadeaway 3 to get the field. But I thought Gabe was really mature with his ability to handle the space, and the gravity effect allowed some open shots. But nobody could really capitalize until Hunter came in and knocked down a couple of massive threes. He did airball a free throw, but he stepped up and hit 3 free throws. And his 9 points during the final portion of the game, both in regulation and in overtime, Utah doesn't win that game without Hunter Erickson. So I was really happy for him.
Yeah, no question. And the clutch plays you alluded to. And with Madsen, he needs to be a volume shooter on this team. And he is their best shooter, okay? Maybe not percentage-wise, but he's got to be the guy that they look to take the big shot. And that's what Craig's getting at with him being a volume shooter and those tough, challenging shots, those fadeaway threes, end of a shot clock, when he's got a fire and he's off balance and falling out of bounds. Those are the type of things that Gabe needs to do for that team. And when you look around this group, he's the one that's capable of doing that. Shar Johnson is more of a creator. He can score. Other guys on this team, there's things they can do. But at the end of the day, Gabe is looked to as that guy who needs to be the volume shooter. And look, he's second in Utah history in 3-pointers made. And that's why they're going to keep going to him, because he's not afraid of the big moment either.
Indeed. Before I get to Brigham Young, what are you willing to say about Utah's Big 12 chances this year? They're not winning the conference, but they've won 3 straight games. Could Craig somehow, some way get this team into the NCAA tournament?
I wouldn't rule it out because of what you alluded to. They've won 3 straight games. And if you can come up with some clutch wins along the way, they're 11-6 overall, to 500 in the league. They got a tough game with Houston coming up, which on the road. And I think Houston's really good, Spence. I had them early, and I'm so impressed with the way that they play. They're so tough mentally and physically. They just pound you, and they beat you up. And to me, they're the team to beat in the Big 12. I think as good as Iowa State is, and Kansas certainly over the years, I don't think this is a great Kansas team for Bill Self. I think they're really good. But to me, I think Houston is the best team in this league.
I agree with that, and we'll see how Utah stacks up. And I'm not going to take a ton away from that game because Houston might win by 30. And ultimately, I don't think it would change a whole lot because there is a gap between those two teams. All right, over to BYU, and here's the thing: Kevin Young gets that job to a lot of celebration, a lot of BYU fans, really, really excited about the potential. And Kevin comes from the NBA. His bench is littered with assistant coaches that have NBA experience. They bring in an NBA strength and conditioning staff, a nutritionist from the Phoenix Suns, and suddenly the collective starts paying a lot of money to get talent. I reference Yegor Demon, who reportedly is a seven-figure kid. Cannon Catchings, a lot of people think he's a first-round prospect, is making good money. AJ DeBance is on his way to play for Kevin next year. But you know the deal, Roxy, when you clearly have the talent on paper, you got to show you can coach. And he hasn't done this before. This is his first go-around. And they're obviously close, but the fact of the matter is they're 0-5 in quad one opportunities. They're 0-4 in games decided by 5 points or less, and they have not won a road game. They have to win tonight. What stands out most to you as you watch this this early project that Kevin is tasked with leading?
Well, it is a work in progress, and it's different the way Mark Pope went about it. And certainly that offense was fun to watch with all the threes they shot last year. This is a team that's still making threes, but they go about it a different way. And, Demon, he hasn't been the same since he hurt his knee in early December in that game against Providence. And I think they're hoping at some point it clicks back in for him. But you could see the talent in terms of his ability to create for others. He is not a scorer as of yet. He clearly needs to get stronger. But it's a talented team. And right now, Catchings, for example, I think is going through a confidence issue. And that's a problem for them. He was playing really well early, but the last 5 games, he has really struggled and trying to find his way again. And I think it's more mental than it is physical right now for him, Spence. And the talent's there. We see it. But he's got to get back on track. And it's important for BYU that he does. And the interesting thing about them, Spence, is I've talked to a few coaches and some NBA people. They think Richie Saunders might be an NBA player. That the things that he does, how quickly he gets his shot off, the toughness that he plays with, that the energy he provides. Look, I'm not saying he's going to be maybe a regular rotation top 8 guy in the NBA, but there's a lot of people that feel, including some coaches around the Big 12, that Richie Saunders is an NBA player.
Well, and Mark badly wanted him at Kentucky. He had a good offer to take off to play for his former head coach, and he's a good player. I mean, he means a lot to them, and I think they'll figure it out because that talent is undeniable, and I just don't know if Kevin can coach. I'm not trying to be critical here, but this is his first time. When you have the talent, we're going to talk about the coaching. Let's take advantage of the final few minutes to get a little hockey in, Roxy, as we are now Hockeytown, USA, of course, with the Utah Hockey Club here. And
apologies to Detroit.
Well, they might have a claim to it. We don't because we're still very early in our experiences. But, I've been to 4 or 5 games. It's so fun. I love watching that sport live. And the NHL live is something else to watch these guys do what they do on skates, forwards and backwards. Like, go out and try and skate in a straight line, see how that goes for you. But they have been up, they have been down, they have been up, they have been down. They've won a couple of straight games, and you're going to call a game of theirs this week. What stands out, as you do your prep, as you learn about the Utah Hockey Club, what stands out most to you?
Well, right now it's the play of the top line and basically the connection that Cooley and Keller have. Keller last night coming back after getting popped in the eye and needed stitches, had the big game. And the struggles that Utah's had at home for some reason. They played well on the road. Marino coming back, I think, is a boost for them on the back end. They need Sergachev back going again. And Connor Ingram being back certainly helps. But the top line right now, the way that they are rolling, even with Gunther being out, but the play of Keller and Cooley right now, it's just fun to watch those two. They have a chemistry, a connection right now that's really fun to see.
Do you think, as we sit here today, they have fallen a little bit, but they're still somewhat in the mix for the wild card? They've got 47 points. Calgary has 51. Colorado has 57. They've fallen behind both Vancouver and St. Louis. And look, Bill Armstrong, I think I mentioned this to you. I got such a kick out of this. The introductory Utah Hockey Club kind of rally press conference included mostly players at the beginning. Spicy Tuna stole the show. Fans were going crazy. Coach Torney took the mic. Fans were going nuts. And Bill Armstrong took the mic. He's like, hey, everybody knows we're rebuilding, right? Like, he's like trying to temper expectations. And so, knowing what they were last year in Arizona and understanding how young they are, I felt like if they could get a wild card, that would be a massive win. Do you think they have that in them this year?
I wouldn't rule it out. They're going to have to handle some home games because, as you know, it's been tough sledding for them for whatever reason at Delta Center this year. That has to get corrected if they're going to be a playoff team. And the interesting thing here down the stretch, and you alluded to the days in Arizona, is they haven't been through this as far as down the stretch being in a playoff race. If they are there, how are they going to handle this? And even let's say they don't make it this year, hypothetically, the experience of going through this will pay dividends for them going forward. But you look at the young core of this group, and it is a talented group that is just going to get better and better. There's a lot of talent coming, whether it's in the minors right now or still playing in juniors. But they have drafted well, at least by prospect-wise, that a bright future if they happen to not make it this year. But I wouldn't rule it out considering this group right now. But this is a key stretch for them, and they have to find ways to win home games. That was a good win against St. Louis over the weekend. In Winnipeg, they got to keep it going and finding ways to win on home ice.
All right, Roxy, before I set you loose, we now have a college football national champ. It is Ohio State, and we now have the first iteration of the 12-team expanded CFP behind us so we can diagnose ultimately how we digested it and the changes that need to be made. I just kind of wonder, as a guy that's covered this thing forever, what do you make of this new college football playoff and how we crown a national champ?
I like it. I like the fact that they value the conference championship. To me, that was important, Spence. That was one of the things for me that I wanted to see if they were going forward with the 12-team playoff. You win the Big 12. You win the ACC. You win the SEC. You should be rewarded with a first-round bye. And I also like the fact they rewarded the group of five with Boise State. Now, do I think Boise State was one of the elite teams? No. But I think they earned it. And so you put them, you give them the bye. But now Ohio State, give them credit. They had to win 4 games along the way. They smashed Tennessee. They went to the Rose Bowl, and they beat Oregon. And they won these last 2 games on neutral nights, and give them credit. They earned this national championship. And this is the way we should be doing it, deciding it on the field. Okay, we had a lot of blowouts in the opening round, which stinks because we want competitive football. I do believe that going forward, we'll get better opening round games. I do see the format expanding again at some point just because, Spence, as we know, there's way too much money in television and putting these games on. So I do sense we'll get an expansion. I don't know if it'll go to 16 or what the next step will be. But this isn't going backward. You don't see playoff formats move backward. 12 is too many. We're going to go down to 8. That's not going to happen. And so I'm just anxious to see what the next step is. But I do like that we got home games. Maybe you make the quarterfinal round home games, rewarding those top 4 seeds. But I think it's great for college football when you get these type of matchups. I just wish we had more competitive games, to be honest with you. We only had a handful of them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, my friend. Always appreciate the time. Great to catch up. Safe travels, as you are now the voice of Utah sports, and we'll get you on soon, okay?
Anytime, my man.
All right, the great Roxy Bernstein, our old buddy from the Pac-12 Network. It's funny how many of these broadcasters we met as a Pac-12 institution here at the University of Utah, but he now does a grip of stuff for ESPN, ESPN Radio. He is a Heisman voter and one of my favorite people that I've met in this business. He is on social media at Roxy Bernstein is where you find him doing some BYU basketball tonight against Colorado, doing some Utah Hockey Club against the Wild, and on Saturday as the Utah women and the BYU men. So a lot of Utah content for our guy Roxy Bernstein coming up. All right, we'll catch a break. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Matt Brown, college football media member, writes a great newsletter. He was on the ground in Atlanta, so we'll get to him coming up on the other side. But before we catch a break, it's time now for a little bit of breaking news. Do we have the worst breaking news sounder in media?
I hope so.
We might. It's very newsroom Aaron Sorkin-ish. There's nobody. Usually breaking news sounders include a VO of a guy being like, this is breaking news.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can't put me on the spot.
No, it's live radio. We're on the spot for 4 hours. So let's fire that up and let's do a little. Okay, go ahead.
And now, breaking news.
That really made a big difference.
Thanks.
Real Salt Lake has added Brazilian goalkeeper Rafael Cabral. So that rumor was floated out by our guy, Tom Bogert. Rafael Cabral, Porter, you should know that he's really good with the ball at his feet.
Ah.
Yep.
As a goalkeeper.
Yep. 34-year-old Brazilian keeper. So Zach McMath is having surgery. Gavin Beavers has been loaned to a Danish club. RSL looks like they have their starting keeper, Rafael Cabral, who's under contract through at least next year. And then the club has options for 27 and 28. So they needed a keeper, and they got it. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Matt Brown is next right here on ESPN 700. College football season came to an end last night in Atlanta. Ohio State is your national champ. Our next guest was on the ground, I believe. I saw him send out a picture on social media. He's been one of our favorites, talk college football all year long. The writer and creator of one of my favorite college football newsletters called Extra Points, my buddy Matt Brown, on a Tuesday. Matt, happy Tuesday, man. You were on the ground in Atlanta last night, yeah?
I was. I just got back to Chicago about 20 minutes ago. It was a little bit of a zoo getting out of town, but I was there, and it was a truly excellent experience, I think.
Tell me about that environment. What was the percentage of Ohio State fans versus Notre Dame fans, and what was it like to kind of be on the ground there?
Yeah, I think it was probably around 60% Ohio State, maybe 55% Ohio State. Normally, I think in these kind of circumstances, the Ohio State fans will generally take over a building, but Notre Dame is probably right up there in terms of as large and as national of a fan base, and one that can afford to show the ridiculous amount of money for a ticket. I mean, to get in the building leading up to the game, the tickets were over $3,000 to go just get at the very top row. Easily the most expensive championship game ticket in the last decade or so. And when that kind of thing happens, especially when you're playing in a really big NFL stadium where you have a really high roof and the sound kind of moves around differently, I think there's always a legitimate fear that it becomes more of a sterile corporate environment rather than the more passionate, collegiate-focused event that you would expect. But I really found this to be a pretty high-energy game, high-energy crowd. Things kind of began to lull a little bit in the middle of the third quarter when it looked like Ohio State had already won the game, but Notre Dame came back pretty quickly, and it was loud. It was intense, and the level of relief, I would say, from Ohio State's coaches, their players, their staffers, was very significant once you get on the ground here, because this is not the typical championship journey, the typical championship expectations or pressures. I think it's a complicated ending for this team.
And we'll get there in a moment. I have not seen a final number as far as the TV ratings go, but as you referenced, if it's $3,000 just to get in the building, I would imagine that the powers that be in college football, and I would imagine when we see the number, the powers that be in television are probably going to celebrate this 12-team format, right? It feels like it's probably checking all the boxes for the people that make the decisions about this stuff.
Oh, I think unquestionably. For anybody on the financial or business side of college athletics or this industry, the first year of the 12-team playoff was a massive, massive success. You were able to prove that you could host a campus site game on short notice in some notoriously difficult to reach and handle environments, right? Like, I don't know if any of you guys listening have ever been to State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is, but there's basically 2 hotels and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a giant camping trip. They sent 100,000 people on 10 days' notice and pulled off a game. There's not a lot of hotels in South Bend, on recruiting visits. People typically have to stay in Chicago or Michigan. They hosted a playoff game. You had strong attendance, strong ratings, and improved ratings and buy-in for the end of the regular season. So there's certainly things I think could be tweaked or improved, and those are things that the administrators are going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. But I think it would be hard to draw up a better bracket, better result, better finale for any of the bean counters than what we had this year.
All right, moving over to this wild ride that it's been for Ryan Day. And look, I don't know that I have an accurate frame of reference for how intensely passionate, maybe at times crazy Ohio State fans are. And I get losing to Michigan 4 times in a row is a really bad look. And I don't know how they lost to Michigan this year with how good they are, how deep. And I get it. I really do. But yeah. Ryan Day is a coach that has a better winning percentage than Jim Tressel. He has a better S&P index than Urban Meyer. He's now one of 3 current coaches that have won a national championship. And it feels like if they moved on from him at the age of 45, he could pick his next job. How real was the heat around him, and what did this run say to people that think he should not be in charge there?
The heat was meaningful. It was not a situation where I think he was in danger of Ohio State actively terminating the contract. And a large part of that is just because his buyout would be absolutely prohibitive. but the stresses on him and his family, I saw some reports leaving the game that there was like extra security around his house after the Michigan game. You get to that point when you realize like it's not worth it, especially because Ryan Day spent a lot of time in the NFL and had interest in NFL positions. Have indicated that they've had interest in him before. And so the kind of mood and thought in a lot of the corners of the industry was if Ohio State lost early in this playoff after the amount of money that was allocated for this roster, how senior-laden and experienced this team was, and those kind of expectations, if it blew up in their face, then rather than a termination, there would be a kind of mutual, amicable parting of ways. And maybe he goes and takes the Colts job or something, right? But that isn't what happened. And it wasn't just that Ohio State had lost to Michigan 4 times in a row. I think Dave's like 70-10. He has one of the highest winning percentages, legitimately in college football history. But it's like all 10 of those losses were especially brutal for Ohio State fans, right? You lose to Michigan 4 times in a row. You lose 2 games in a row to Oregon. You had the 1 versus 2 matchup earlier in the year in Eugene, and then you had Oregon the year before as your premier out of conference game when they really weren't that good, and you had C.J. Stroud and you lose. You had the very winnable playoff game against Georgia when they won the national championship by roughly 800 points, and things kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter, and you missed a 50-yard field goal, and that's the end of it, right? There's something I think acutely frustrating about being a team that wins almost every single game, often in a way that feels psychologically frustrating to the fan base. And then the last 3 or 4 years, they've lost most of their big games, unless they're playing Penn State, who has the same problem, and I think whose fan base is facing a similar kind of neurosis. So then to go from all of that and all of the negative energy to not just beating 4 really good teams in a row, but mostly beating the absolute snot out of them in a way that they really didn't do it to any competent team during the regular season, changes everything. And if anything, I think this actually might be an interesting case study for how you have to handle load management in the 12-team playoff era. You're going to have to play an NFL schedule to win a national championship. You're going to have to play 16 games. You can't empty the chamber in early October. And that might mean, not that you're hot dogging it or anything, but that might mean that you're willing to trade some less exciting finishes or some closer margins of victory than you might expect to keep your team fresh and ready to go in late December and January. And that's what Ohio State did this year.
Do you think there's any chance, and maybe this is just me getting older, because I'm thinking what it would be like to win – he's finished in the top 10 every year he's been the Ohio State head coach. As you referenced, he's 70-10. That's 3rd all-time winning percentage in college football. 1 of 3 coaches to win a national championship, as I referenced. Do you think there's any part of him that's like, I'm over this? And maybe he decides that he would like to go do what he does at a top, the very highest of levels somewhere else. I don't think he'd leave for a college job, but do you think, all of the pressure – regardless of what he seems to do, is that something that maybe he says, I'm not interested in doing this for you people anymore?
I mean, it's entirely possible. If that conversation is going to happen, I'm not just going to, it'll be happening after the championship parade and after something else. I think the next month in Columbus is going to be fascinating just to see how fans, and I include myself in this, honestly, how they reconcile their previous sentiments with this guy and compartmentalize the frustration over the last few years with the final result. I understand that many people listening to this and think, how on earth could you go 70-10 and be unhappy? Like that sounds insane. Utah and BYU fans would walk across broken glass to have some kind of a run of success like that. But I think you also have to remember that Urban Meyer, when he was the coach at Ohio State, had Ohio State in the top 10 every single year. Made the playoffs several times, won a national championship. Had there been a 12-team playoff era, I think Ohio State would have almost certainly won at least another championship during that era. And then Jim Tressel, before Urban Meyer, had Ohio State in the top 10 almost every single year and won a title. Like, you really have to go back to World War II to find multiple years in a row where Ohio State has sucked. It's probably the most recession-proof program in college football, and that isn't me just saying that as a guy that was born in Columbus. Like, look up Sports Reference, man. Like that's you have the highest floor of anybody in the sport. So if you come in and you're just a pretty good coach, you're going to win 9 games there. You have to really, really screw up to bottom out. And I think that juxtaposed to the results on the field is why you saw some frustration. If they decided in 2 weeks, I did what I said I was going to do, I'm going to go coach the Colts, I'm going to go work with grown men, forget this, I couldn't blame him. But I don't know enough to know if that's if there's an opening right now that would be of interest to him, given now there's a title defense.
Captain Moroni wouldn't go 70-10 in college football, Matt, if we're being honest. I mean, you said BYU fans, you know, walking off, and you're one of the few media members I could actually make that reference to. But 70-10.
Captain Moroni, I think, would struggle to recruit in this environment. I remember, it's been a minute, but I remember he rubbed a couple of people the wrong way. Yeah, very, very passionate guy. But not everybody was always thrilled with his approach. You have to be a little bit more of a team player in this era.
But we're talking about the chief captain of the Nephites. He'd adjust. You know that.
Sure. Well, yeah. Definitely team schematic mind.
Okay. Moving on before we start getting emails. I just knew you were the one that I could ask that question to for obvious reasons. All right. We had a lot of good college football guests on yesterday. We also had the game on our station at 5:30, and I asked them all the same question, Matt, because I just felt like, in my opinion, on paper, that was a mismatch last night. And so I said, can Notre Dame make this a fair fight? Do you think they did?
Oh, unquestionably. I mean, the first 10 minutes of the game, I think, laid out exactly the script that Notre Dame needed, which was run a lot of QB power and hold the ball for 8 minutes and just paper cut Ohio State to death. And limit the number of possessions or times that Ohio State could score. Buckeyes scored a touchdown in their first 4 drives, but because Notre Dame was so efficient at the beginning of the game, the margin never really got out of hand. I think that the only real mismatch on that game was Notre Dame's ability to throw the ball downfield versus Ohio State's secondary. If Nelson has to throw in the ball 32 times in a game, Notre Dame's going to lose. That's not a team that's really built to come back, and they almost did. There was a pathway for them to win. It would have looked a lot like the Michigan game, where you just drag Ohio State into the mud and make them fight in a phone booth. They just weren't able to do it for 4 quarters. They're really only able to do it for about 14 minutes.
So equal time here for coaches, because I've been wildly impressed with Marcus Freeman. Didn't start out well with that home loss to Marshall, and obviously week 2 was at Northern Illinois this year, but what would it be like at the age of 35, your first head coaching job is you're the head coach of Notre Dame? That's a wild thing. And as I've listened to him more throughout this run and studied him more throughout Notre Dame's march to the national championship game, I've been wildly impressed with his communication, wildly impressed with the way his players respond to him. He kind of just feels like this rising star in the ranks of college football. So what stands out most to you about this kind of wonderkin's rise we've seen from Notre Dame's head coach Marcus Freeman?
Sure, and maybe this market doesn't know about this, or I don't know if it was mentioned on the broadcast 400 times, but Marcus Freeman, of course, played at Ohio State.
Yep.
He's from Ohio, and as Ohio State fans went to the message boards over the last 2 years, contemplating ejecting Ryan Day into space, one of the 2 people that everybody said we should go bring home would be Marcus Freeman. I think you're exactly right. The most impressive thing that I think he's managed to do this season was take what is normally the most unlikable brand in college football and make them likable and make them fun. It was fun to root for Notre Dame this year. They're running a inspired triple option kind of offense. They're one of the only major teams where the quarterback run game is an integral part of what they're doing. They had 2 really exciting offensive skill position players, and this team, they had like 5 starters missing, multiple NFL guys due to injury, and they were counted out nationally after that Northern Illinois loss, by week 4. Right? And part of that's just because they got a little bit unlucky with the schedule this year. We, in our lifetime, we have had so many Notre Dame coaches who are so deeply, deeply unlikable. I don't know if there are blood relatives that enjoyed watching and rooting for Charlie Weiss. Brian Kelly is not somebody that's going to be on the Mr. Congeniality Award list for anybody that works in the college sports industry. That's not what Freeman is, and he's not the stereotype of what a Domer has typically been. I don't know if he's going to end up staying there for 30 years. Nobody really does in this industry other than Whittingham. But if I was a Notre Dame fan, which I'm not, but if I was, I would be very heartened by this year and feel very good about where your coaching staff is today and moving forward.
Heard a lot of college football media members complain about the length of time, the fact that it's January 20th in this Monday night game. I get it, but you can't go head to head against the NFL. You're a smart guy. What do you think the solution is here?
I don't really know if there is one. I understand the frustration too. I think in a perfect world, maybe this is a game that's played in the central time zone and you go a little bit earlier and try to alleviate some of those things. You already kind of got beat up in some of these early playoff games by going against the NFL. The only thing I could possibly think of is potentially starting the season a week earlier. But then you're looking at a lot of lost revenue from having maybe multiple games before class actually starts. It's one of the issues that the college baseball schedule has, where the postseason goes well past graduation for many teams. The Final Four has the same issue too. The championship game's usually on a Monday. It's usually in the Eastern time zone. It usually goes way past everyone else's bedtime. It stinks. When I'm president, the day after the championship game will be a day off, just like the Super Bowl. But that's we're not there yet.
I love it. What do you make of? I think Joel Klatt's the one that's been pushing this narrative of college football making the Rose Bowl their answer to the Super Bowl.
I understand it from the perspective of tradition. And, look, even if you're a completely cynical person, when the sun sets over the mountains around the third quarter, it does look beautiful. The most cynical reporters I know, I haven't covered a game there yet, but tell me no, when you touch the grass, you recognize that it's perfect. The very selfish thing, response for me, and this is not something that other people are going to care about, but you and I might care a little bit, is that the Rose Bowl is hard to get to. And when you host gigantic events in Los Angeles because traffic is so bad and everything is so sprawled out, it's difficult to get hotels. It's difficult to do media availability. You're just stuck there. And there's really three cities where you can have a great stadium experience and fans and everybody involved in the event can be relatively close by, and you can have all the programming within walking distance. I think that's Atlanta, it's New Orleans, and it's Indianapolis. I know everybody makes fun of Indianapolis, but if you've covered a major event there, you get it. You're not there to go move or to go check out the art scene. You're there for this major football game. It'd be cool for television, but having covered events in other places, I think if I had to go to the Rose Bowl every year, I would complain a little bit about being stuck in my car.
And there it is. There it is. Yes, the final point there. Hey, the narrative, Matt, as you know, is that Ohio State bought a championship, paid a grip of money for a group, 20 to 25 mil. I don't know what the number is. But you know what's interesting? The majority of that revenue went to returning players. In a way, Ryan Day built this thing over a long game type play. And I think the narrative is they just went and bought a bunch of dudes in the transfer portal. They brought in some. And we've been debating here because Utah football is bringing in 41 new players. It's a 53% roster turnover. And you get it because they really struggled a year ago. But Coach Witt's MO has always been recruit, develop, retain, win. And the best Utah teams have always been teams that have had third, fourth, fifth year guys. 04, 08, Rose Bowl, Pac-12 champs as well. And is that a model for success in college football? So how would you articulate the way Ryan Day and the Ohio State administration went about building this roster and allocating their funds?
Yeah, this is something I'm going to be writing about some more this week because I've seen that narrative too, and I do think it's missing the point a little bit. So, yes, the total payroll for Ohio State's football roster was about $20 million. I was down on the field, talked to their athletic director, Ross Bjork. He confirmed that. Ryan Day alluded to it in the final press conference. Both people also said, and I'm inclined to believe this, that wasn't the highest payroll in college football this year. And it's hard to get hard and fast data about this, depending on who you talk to. Oregon, Texas, Miami were all in that conversation as well. They didn't make it to where Ohio State did. What I believe you're seeing at this point, now we have a couple of years of data, is enough evidence to suggest that you can and should plug particular holes in your roster via the transfer portal. And there's some position groups where it's easier to do this than others, but that it's very difficult to build the bulk of your roster that way simply because you need continuity. So one thing I think I'd point to here is that every single starter in that championship game on Ohio State's offensive and defensive lines was a high school commit to Ohio State. Seth McLaughlin, the center, came from Alabama. You might have remembered that he had a truly horrific game in the college football playoff, had a couple of fumbles. That's why he was off. He was injured, did not play through the playoff run. But most of those guys were seniors or redshirt juniors or people that turned down going to the NFL for the third or fourth round, delaying their second contract to come back and win a title. I think there's enough evidence to suggest you can definitely get a quarterback in the transfer portal. And in fact, I think that's going to be pretty common because no one's going to sit on the bench for more than 1 year. So there's going to be a lot of good guys. Will Howard is a mid 3-star who got benched for Adrian Martinez. It wasn't exactly like picking up Caleb Williams in the portal, but like those guys exist. Ohio State had picked up maybe the best safety in the country that was only available because Nick Saban retired, and picked up a really good running back that was okay taking a substantially lesser role to split carries with a 5-star high school Ohio State commit. The place where I think you run into the most trouble is trying to build the line of scrimmage that way, and it's just because there generally are not enough good offensive linemen that hit the portal. And you really generally need a lot of experience and time and reps to build chemistry specifically within that unit. We're going to see a couple of teams win championships in different ways, right? Like, I don't think everyone has to do things exactly like Ohio State. You don't have to spend exactly that much money. And to be fair, a non-trivial amount of that money was not donor money. That was actual, honest-to-goodness, legitimate corporate marketing deals. And Ohio State will probably, them in Texas, will probably always have the most legitimate corporate marketing deals, maybe Michigan in some years. But I think it's going to be easier to build a team where the majority of your players are people that signed with you as high schoolers, or if they were transfers, stay with your program for multiple years. And then you go and you try to fill 3 or 4 holes in your roster each year.
So the Big Ten now has back-to-back national champs. They have Oregon with Uncle Phil's money. They have Ohio State and Michigan. They have L.A., Chicago, New York, if you count Rutgers, I suppose. And there are a lot of Penn State fans in Philly. They have some of the biggest markets in the country. They have some of the best teams in the country. Is it time to say the Big Ten is not just the preeminent conference in college football, but it might not be close?
I don't know if I'm willing to say that it's overwhelmingly the best conference in college football. I think pound for pound it's probably still the SEC, but that gap is as small as it's ever been. And there's a reason to believe that trend could change. And it's interesting because this is also true when you look at the history of college football. The main entities that were opposed to giving athletic scholarships were Big Ten teams. Because those Big Ten schools were in more industrialized and larger metropolitan areas. It was much easier to give those athletes make-work jobs. And schools in the South, which were often in smaller areas and less wealthy states and had less wealthy fan bases, wanted to give scholarships so they could be at equal footing because they knew that Michigan and Ohio State and Minnesota and Wisconsin can kind of outbid them. And then you went to the athletic scholarship model. There was some more parity. You had the under-the-table bagman era where I think the Southeast really had a major advantage. And there's an argument to be made as you move into revenue sharing and move into a world where money above the cap that has to be tied to marketing deals and is going to be more strictly like monitored via the court system is going to give another big advantage to schools in not just larger markets, but that have richer fans and are tied to larger industries. And you can say what you will about there's a lot of great schools in the SEC, but the higher end institutions in the Big Ten have 50,000 student bodies, alumni networks of 200, 300, 400,000 people, and law schools and medical schools, and a deeper tradition of professional education and richer alumni than most schools in the SEC. So it's entirely possible that the pendulum will swing back. Auburn has pressurized lumber money. Georgia has alcohol money. Texas and Texas A&M have oil money, which is a different level of rich. I mean, the Michigans of the world have SaaS money, tech money. Larry Ellison's girlfriend, decides she's a Michigan fan, so Larry Ellison cuts a $3 million check for Bryce Underwood. There's things that Ohio State and Michigan, and to some extent, Wisconsin and Nebraska can do that a lot of schools in the SEC can't. And that's going to be, I think, an uncomfortable cultural, reevaluation compared to how people in the South look at their football programs over the last 15 years.
Final thing, Matt, we'll set you loose. When I saw that you're on the rundown, I wanted to ask you about this because you'll be good with it. The U.S. Department of Education, we've been waiting for a little Title IX guidance. We got it.
Yeah.
So future revenue distributions from a school to an athlete for his or her NIL rights are now what's called financial assistance, which must be made proportionally available to male and female athletes. I was not aware of this, but my news alerts tell me we have a new president that has been installed, so potentially this could change things. But what's your take on where we're at now after what the Department of Education released and moving forward with a new president in the White House and a new administration? What effect could that have on this ruling, and where do you think we land?
It's a great question. And what I can tell you guys is I've been tracking this for over a year and talking to a lot of experienced litigators and attorneys that work in the Title IX space. And what I heard pretty consistently over the last 9-10 months was that based on the letter of the law and based on court precedent and administrative precedent, and not just from like the Biden and Obama administrations, but going further back, based on the law, the DOE's guidance here makes a lot of sense. That's part of the reason why you saw a lot of universities try to really hedge their bets with revenue sharing and even with some of their work with NIL, because they're very worried about that potential liability. So that's true on one component. So I'm not shocked that the advice came at all. I am shocked that it came 3 days before the Biden administration's out the door. The other kind of challenging thing, though, about Title IX is that there's no Title IX cops, right? The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education will go after you when somebody sues you, when there's a complaint, and that process takes forever, right? We have a case still pending right now with Oregon, where one of the components are women athletes suing over disproportionate publicity. And side benefits and administrative support around NIL, to say nothing of revenue sharing, and we're not close to that case being finished. So what a lot of universities in this market, in my market, across the country, have decided to do is say, look, we're all speeding. They can't arrest all of us, and we don't see enough state troopers out here, so I'm not going to adjust my speed. I'm just going to hope that I'm not the red Lambo that draws the Fed's attentions first. Like if the Feds came sniffing in, almost everybody in Division I is out of compliance and Title IX in some capacity. It's just not regular. It's not enforced very often. So this is the major question: is what this administration decides to do with this particular component of Title IX. And honest to God, I think that's not an easy political question to answer, right? Because you've had a lot of conservative activists point to Title IX as part of the justification for fighting back really hard against trans participation in athletics. You're going to have a lot of other conservative activists who are not willing to go to the mattresses to fight over equal distribution of financial payments for women's basketball players, to take money from football players and give it to women's basketball or women's volleyball. You're going to have some conservative activists who don't think we should have Title IX at all. And I think there may be a real bipartisan conversation about revisiting that law, because it wasn't written for sports. And it wasn't really written for a world where collegiate athletics becomes more explicitly professionalized. And that's a conversation worth having. So all of this is to say, I actually am really frustrated that the Biden administration decided to do this, because I think that just injects more chaos and uncertainty without a meaningful solution. And it's not a good time to go have a .edu email address working in this stuff here, because you're probably going to get sued either way.
Where can people go get all your work, Matt?
You can find my stuff at extrapointsmb.com or Matt Brown EP on Twitter and Blue Sky.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, the great Matt Brown. I'm telling you, it's one of the best college football newsletters around. A lot of it is the business of college football, things off the field. It's called Extra Points. Find it on extrapointsmb.com or his Twitter page is at MattBrownEP. All right, got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks before we catch a break. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members. Now, we've got conference championship weeks coming up, and they're basically giving you a free square. It's Jaden Daniels. He only needs one passing yard, and you win a square. And all you need to do is pick 2 or more players and their projections. You can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So it's not the 7 days of Picksmas, but it is the conference championship Sunday. So Buffalo, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes more than 253 yards. Travis Kelce more or less than 69 yards. Josh Allen rush for more than 48 yards. Then Philly, Washington, as I referenced, Jaden Daniels only needs 1 yard. That's it to win the square. You got Jalen Hurts rushing for more or less than 31 yards, or Saquon Barkley simply rushing for 1 touchdown. Check Prize Picks for up-to-date player projections prior to the games coming up on Sunday. So here's the deal. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Don't forget stand-up comic Jim Jeffries. Yeah, that guy. He's going to join us over the phone in the 4 o'clock hour. We're back to college football with Mike Sanford Jr. So keep it right here on a Tuesday drive on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Stand-up comedian Jim Jeffries will join the show today. I've watched a number of Jim's specials. What I'll say is I'm not sure that it's the type of content that needs to be on Sports Talk Radio. So have you had a conversation with Jim Jeffries about the format that he is about to join?
He does know the deal. He does know he's just promoting the stand-up tour, not actually performing it. I'm always actually surprised, and I know I shouldn't be because it's just they're just people. They're professionals like us. I'm always surprised at the filter some of those guys are able to have when they're like professionally able to speak the way that they do on stage.
When you booked Rappaport in studio,
like exactly.
If you've ever watched any of Rappaport's content, like he doesn't go more than one sentence without dropping the cursiest of curses. And Jim Jeffries is kind of the same. He's an Australian guy. Have you ever seen any of his specials?
Yeah, they're like all on Netflix. He's got like 6 or 7 of them up there. So I've seen I want to say 2 or 3, but definitely not like his whole, what do you call it, discography?
Yeah, his last special, This Is Me Now, is on Netflix. I believe it's still on Netflix. So I'm a single dad, as you know, both the son and now a dog. His single dad takes, oh man, they're hilarious. They're not for on-air consumption, at least on this format, but he'll be playing Wise Guys, yeah?
He's going to be at the Eccles.
Oh, at the Eccles.
The Eccles.
So as part of the interview, getting some free Jim Jeffries tickets?
We do have a giveaway, so some of our listeners will get free Jim Jeffries tickets.
That giveaway is going right in my back pocket.
I'll ask about you too.
I'm not allowed to do that, but I would love to see Jim Jeffries live. So he's going to hop on today. Then Mike Sanford Jr. rolls by for some more college football on the program. Some news that has kind of dropped since we have been on air and been very busy. Sounds like Josh McDaniels is being hired as the New England Patriots offensive coordinator for the 3rd time to work with Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, from what I understand, that was the second that Mike Vrabel was hired. It was pretty much a sure thing that would happen. And that's from guys that have been in locker rooms with those two and know the relationship that Vrabel and McDaniels have. So yeah, I think that was one that it's surprising when you see it, just because 3rd time, same job, you're going to give it another try. I think that this time around, it's the pairing that they really like, and Vrabel was the one that made that happen.
For the 3rd time, McDaniels back in New England to call plays, be offensive coordinator. Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings agreed to a multi-year extension today as well. So obviously there's still NFL games to be played, but this is the time of year where a lot of the really good teams are obviously still playing. So certain organizations are waiting for them to be done in order to find their next head coach. Ben Johnson has been hired officially. This was yesterday as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. He will coach Caleb Williams. Here's my only question about Ben Johnson. Have you ever heard him interviewed, and have you been, like, blown away by his personality? He seems to be kind of, like, robotic.
Right.
And I'm not sure that that's bad for a play caller, but I don't know if that's great for your head coach.
Yeah, no, I share that sentiment because it's one where, we can think of Andy Ludwig, a guy who I think is a really good play caller, a really good offensive formulator, but I would never see Andy Ludwig as a head football coach. Just because of his demeanor, the way he approaches the game, it's more about diagnosing. He's almost like a doctor, it feels like, right? He's figuring stuff out and trying to apply a fix to it. A head coach in almost every circumstance needs a little bit of oomph, a little bit of, I don't know, whatever Dan Campbell has, right? And maybe that's something we have to get away from, because you do see coaches come in and have some success that don't have that traditional football coach feel. But I understand where you're coming from, but I want to see it now that he is the head coach. Now that he does have that title, does he adjust to it at all? Does he, is he more upfront, more public facing? And we'll just have to see. But what I will say is I love some of his offensive design, some of his play calls. You can call them trick plays, but a lot of times they're not trick plays at all. They're just designed to misdirect. They're designed to look like trick plays, and they're really simple formulations. I love watching his offense, and I think with the right system, the right personnel, he could be really successful.
All right, let me get your take on this. So the final CFP rankings were released, obviously, now that the season is behind us. BYU came in at 17. Arizona State where did Arizona State land? Oregon won. So BYU, so Arizona State came in at 12. BYU at 17, Iowa State 18, Colorado at 23. That rounds out your Big 12 teams as far as ranked in the final CFP rankings. When it came to the AP poll, Arizona State comes in at 7, BYU at 13. I know BYU fans are very sad today that SMU is 12. It will be okay. BYU at 13, Iowa State at 15. Looks like that's it. Oh, no, Colorado held on at number 25. So, Porter, if BYU is 13 in the final AP and they're 17 in the final CFP, where's their preseason slot next year? I feel like it's top 20. I feel like it's like between 15 and 20.
I think so. I think they'll be a top 25 team when it comes to preseason rankings. But as you know, Spence, those rankings don't always reflect necessarily everything that you see at the end of the year. They're going to be taking into account a bunch of recruiting rankings, a bunch of prognostications of what this team will look like next year. I think BYU will be a top 25 team. I don't know that they'll be a top 15 team in the preseason rankings. I think they'll be, 22 or so. But again, those are things that. Why do we even do the preseason ones? Just to talk about on the radio?
Because we have 4 hours of sports talk radio to do, Porter. Unfortunately, we can't just fill time talking about our favorite Jim Jeffrey stand-up special. That's all it's for. It's for content for people like us to talk about, people like Mark Schlabach to write about, because we're trying to generate interest. And you want to talk about the Jazz today?
Yeah.
We'll get there.
We'll
get there. Mark Schlabach wrote his way too early preseason top 25 coming up for the fall. BYU comes in at 9 for Schlabach's way too early top 25. He has Ohio State and they're the Vegas favorite to win it again. Texas at 2. So Ohio State 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame 4, Georgia 5, Oregon 6, Clemson 7, LSU 8, BYU 9. Bringing back Jake Retzlaff, LJ Martin, Chase Roberts, Keelan Marion, Harrison Taggart, Isaiah Glasker, Jack Kelly, and Tanner Wall. Jacob Robinson's going to the NFL. Tyler Batty will play pro football, but he's graduated. Crew Wakely transferred. Connor Pay also will be playing pro football. So some losses, but a grip of players returning. Mark has Iowa State at 11 out of the Big 12. Arizona State at 14. So he has Arizona State as the number 3 ranked team in the Big 12. Kansas State at 16. As we kind of scroll down, my guess is that's all for the Big 12, and it is. So no Colorado in the top 25. And obviously, Utah has a lot of questions to answer. I heard Joe Klatt talking about this on his pod this morning. He was talking about this from a Michigan standpoint. And he made a point that I thought was somewhat interesting. I don't know how much meat is on this bone, but I just thought about it through the prism of Utah and BYU. And I want to get your thoughts, Porter. He said, anytime your rival accomplishes something, so like if you're Sharon Moore, if you're Michigan, if you're their AD and administration, you're looking at what Ohio State just did. You're looking at their formula. You're looking at their payroll. And because they are your rival, you're saying to yourselves, how can we get back on their level, even though Michigan beat Ohio State this year? If you're Utah, are you looking at what BYU did this year as a shot across the bow at all and using that as motivation to maybe get back to where this thing was not too long ago?
I think you kind of have to. Maybe not, in all circumstances, all situations, is that your guiding beacon, but you have to. And part of the reason is not just because they're rivals, Spence, and you're wanting to best your rival. Part of that reason is because these two rivals are so interconnected. They are in the same market for all intents and purposes. They are in the same, state. They are fighting for some of the same corporate money, which corporate money in college sports is now money for your roster, if you can wiggle it the right way. So that's why you absolutely are looking at some of the things they're doing both wrong and right and trying to adjust to that, trying to, maybe tinker with your strategy on how you approach this new landscape a little bit. I think ultimately you're probably not going to use any other school as a guiding beacon again, but you're definitely keeping a side eye on not only your rivals, but also just teams that are similarly suited to you, whether it's market or geographic recruiting footprint. There's a lot of that where teams will look for, yes, what BYU's doing, but also the other way around, where BYU's seeing what Utah's doing, developing players and the like. The same may go for Utah, trying to see how they got their best defensive tackle to leave Salt Lake and go to Provo this year.
Utah Jazz went down to the Big Easy and dropped a couple of games to the Pelicans. They were ahead by 25 points last night. C.J. McCollum had 45, 6 points in overtime. The Pelicans, that's the largest comeback in franchise history. They came back to beat the Jazz. If you're looking to watch one of the best teams in the NBA that's actually trying to win, the Jazz are back in action tomorrow at OKC. So, night off for the Jazz tonight. Busy night in the NBA. Of course, as we now have moved on from college football officially, so no Jazz basketball tonight. But there's a sneaky big game for one of our in-state college basketball teams tonight. BYU is at Colorado. Colorado is not good this year. I think they are the worst team in the conference record-wise. I'm not sure they've won a Big 12 game as I look up the standings in real time. In fact, they have not. They're 0-6 in the Big 12. They're 9-8 overall. BYU right now is 2-4 in conference. They've got to win tonight. They have not won on the road. They have not won a quad one game. And as of now, they're not close to being projected as an NCAA tournament team. That 2-4 record in conference ties them with Cincinnati and Oklahoma State. Arizona State, K-State 1-5, Colorado 0-6. So BYU with kind of a sneaky big game tonight. Utah 3-3 in conference. And in case you missed it, Utah's next game has been moved. It was originally scheduled for tonight, and now will be tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock Mountain Time against Houston, who just is impossible. This will be a cage fight. This will be a physical matchup. Houston has big physical NBA, prospects, future pros, and ultimately it'll be interesting to see how Utah stacks up. But if they stay within 20 against Houston tomorrow, I think that'll be a win. The women are in action tomorrow against Kansas here in Salt Lake. Utah State back at it after losing to UNLV last week. They welcome in Nevada tomorrow in Logan. So some college basketball top of mind this time of year as we are inching our way towards the Ides of March. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We're going to take a little bit of break and have a little fun. Break from sports, and sports is fun. Stand-up comedy is also fun. The legend Jim Jeffries, who's in town to play a show at the Echoes Theater, will stop by coming up next. And then we are back to college football with Mike Sanford. Mike Sanford Jr., and then break into the 5 o'clock hour of the program on this Tuesday drive. So keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, rolling along on a Tuesday afternoon. We're going to bring in Mike Sanford Jr. coming up to do a little college football. We'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program. But coming up on February the 13th at the Eccles Theater here in Salt Lake City, our next guest is performing live. I've long been a fan, and so this is a treat for me to welcome in stand-up comic, actor, writer, et cetera, et cetera. Jim Jeffries on the program on a Tuesday afternoon. Jim, happy Tuesday. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me, mate. I'm doing great.
I got to ask you right out of the gates, are you a sports fan of any kind?
I'm a big sports guy. Yeah, I mostly follow baseball, so I'm lucky enough to support the Dodgers, which we seem to get all the trades at the moment. And I follow the Clippers a bit because my son's mad into basketball. But I grew up watching rugby and rugby league in Australia.
Do you know who Joe Ingles?
I like the World Cup. I'll watch anything really.
Okay. Do you know who Joe Ingles is?
Yes, I know who Joe Ingles is. Joe Ingles played for Utah Jazz for a long time, and now he plays for somewhere else now. But he got Australia the bronze medal, man. I know Joe Ingles, of course I do.
Okay, yeah, because we had Joe Ingles and Dante Exum here, and when they were here playing for the Jazz, I was working over for the Jazz radio station, and Joe was like the funniest dude. I mean, he was a basketball player, but he was just hilarious. What is it about the Australian humor that seems to tickle Americans' funny bone the way it does?
I think a lot of it's got to do with phrasing, and we seem to be laid back. You know, we seem to be cool guys, you know, but I don't know if we are. I think we're not as laid back as people say we are. You know, I think people thought we were cool for a while, and then we got screwed over by ray gun in the Olympics, and it's really taken us back a few steps.
Hey, I'll only speak for myself, Jill. I thought it was hilarious. I thought ray gun ruled. I thought it was awesome.
There's a comedy club in Melbourne that's trying to do Ray Gun the musical, and she has sent legal papers trying to get it stopped. So she doesn't seem very chill, old Ray Gun.
So High and Dry, out on Netflix right now. Jim, is that your 7th special that you released?
No, it's my 9th.
9th.
But my 7th in America.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm recording another one in Chicago in about 4 weeks' time. That will be released in about 4 months on Netflix. So I got one more in me, I think.
Oh, you've got more than one more in you. You're 47 years old. You've got a lot left in you.
I never try to look too much further ahead. You see,
I see.
I always think that the last one I'm going to do is the last one I'm going to do, and then no one's going to want to see me again or whatever. So I try to put my everything into the next special, and then you think you're never going to record one again, and then about a year later, you're like, oh, this material's pretty good. I probably should try to record it. But in saying that I'm 47, my birthday's Valentine's Day, so I'll probably celebrate it there in Utah.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, if you need somewhere to go, let me know. I know all the good spots around here. So 7 specials here in the U.S., and, of course, that's how I became familiar with your work. I just – actually, you know what? Before we get to what I was about to ask you, what you just said struck me because, you know, we're a sports talk radio show, but I like to branch out. And during COVID, we had Jeff Schaefer on the program, who's one of the producers of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And what you just said, Jim, about recording a special and then believing this could be your last – I didn't know this, but Jeff told us that that's how Larry David was at the end of every season of Curb Your Enthusiasm. He said, I don't have anything left in me, and then took some time off and would record another season. Is that approach somewhat commonplace in your industry?
I think that's a lot easier for Larry David than it is for me. You know, he probably just goes, like, and also for him to go, I might not have another season of Curb left in me. What is he, 80 years old? He might not. You know what I mean? He has to look at it like it might be the last one. But I think that is a common approach. I think it would be terrible to brag and just to go, I've got 10 more specials left in me. I'm going to go on forever or whatever. You know, if it all ends tomorrow, I'm happy with the body of work that I did, and it's there for people to watch. My sons will get to see the specials, you know. So I as I said, I just try to look one step ahead, you know, one step ahead. That way you're never too disappointed.
Is it possible because I became familiar with you with Alcoholocaust back in 2010.
That's the best one. That's the best special. That's one. Alcoholocaust is the one I'm most proud of, and no one saw it. It was shown on Showtime for like 3 or 4 times, and you have to see it online. And it's not even on YouTube on my channel, but that's my best special is Alcohol Holocaust. Yeah.
Well, you just answered my question because I was wondering if it was possible for you to rank which you think your best one is, and that's the one that I believe, Jim, was you at your peak. But it feels like, and I've seen, well, I'll just say I've seen all 7 of the ones you released in America. That's why I thought, in the United States, that's why I thought this was going to be, your 8th coming up. It feels to me that and one of the things I love about the craft, and I'm a huge stand-up comedy fan. We always have stand-up comics on the show when they're here playing in our market, because I think you people fascinate me, the courage that you have to do what you do. And the fact that thousands of people show up to watch you with a microphone blows my mind. So from my vantage point, you've grown and evolved into a different place today. I don't know how much of that is just your daily habits or just getting older. Is that fair to say, since that alcohol cost back in 2010?
Look, if I was the same like I was in Alcohol Holocaust, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be dead. Yeah. So, there's like, you can talk about evolving. A lot of it's just surviving. Like if I think my second best special is probably Bear because of the gun control routine, and then my third favorite is Intolerant, and that's one that maybe rated the lowest out of all of them. But I look back on that special, and I think that one's a banger. Yeah, of course you have to evolve. I'm a father. I got 2 kids. I couldn't talk about cocaine and prostitutes for the rest of my life. It just, it wouldn't have. My wife wouldn't have been happy about it, But my audience has evolved with me. So when I first started doing comedy, my shows would be at 10 o'clock at night, and there'd be like a late night rock star type of thing, and everyone was young and everyone was wasted in the crowd. And now as I go, more people in their 40s are coming to see me now, and I've moved my performance time to 7 o'clock because I know that we'll all be out of the theatre by 9:30 at a reasonable time, and we all can get to bed by 10.
Where do you get the courage to do what you do? Where did you find that? Was that something you were born with? Was that something you developed? Louis C.K. often drops the line, like, have the courage to suck at something until you're great at it. Did you always have it, Jim, or is it something you developed?
No, I didn't always have it. I did a few open mic spots when I was 17 that went so badly that I didn't do it again until I was 20. I thought I couldn't do it again. And I thought about it every day until I turned 20 to do it again. And then for the first year, from 20 to 21, I didn't take the microphone out of the stand because my hands would shake too much, and then 22, 23, I just sort of figured it out. And then I probably had more confidence 25 to 30 than I ever had, doing the actual job because I was just fearless at that stage. And now I have to be fearless doing the job because I'm so old now that I have no other skills. If I don't do this job, what do I do? So I better be good at this, And I've also learned just to be comfortable in my own skin a little bit more. It takes sort of finding a persona more than finding a voice.
So you've done other things. You've acted, you've written, you've produced. It seems like a lot of people just get that stand-up comedy bug and they can't shake it. Is stand-up your preferred thing juxtaposed to all the other things you've done?
Stand-up's what I'm best at. I would like to do more acting, but that's not in my control, So everyone always goes, are you going to do more acting? And that's like saying to somebody, are you going to sleep with good-looking women? Well, it's not my choice; it's theirs. You know what I mean? So if someone chose for me to be in a movie, then I'll be in a movie. But it's not my decision. Where stand-up comedy is my decision every day. It's my decision to book the shows in. It's my decision to write new jokes. It's my decision to get up there and perform. And so I love stand-up because it's always been there for me. If I've ever needed an outlet or I've ever needed some creativity where I want to get my voice out, I can just do it with stand-up. With acting and anything that deals with TV or production or game show hosting or whatever, you're at the mercy of the executives. And I'm not at the mercy of the executives with stand-up.
I wonder, and I know that people probably roll their eyes when I ask this question, but Jerry Seinfeld talks about having a yellow, sticky pad by his bed, and he wakes up and writes a joke based off of something he thought of either the night before or a dream. What is, if you have one, your process when it comes to writing your material?
Well, I've never written a joke down. I have written a word here and there on my phone in the notes section. There's a whole lot of jumbled up words from in the middle of the night you write down, and the word will help you bounce off to the actual joke. But I've never actually written a joke down, or I've never actually sat down and thought, now I have to write. What I do is I joke around with my mates. I find something funny that I've said, and then I think, oh, there's something in that. Then I start it on stage thinking it'll be 10, 15 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever, and then I try to expand it as much as possible. So the core of the joke starts out at home, and then most of the writing actually happens on stage. Because it's just like when you're riffing in a bar with your friends, you know, I can top that joke with this line and that line and this line and that line and get the audience rolling. And so something that might be 2 minutes, sometimes you can expand that into a 20-minute routine. So you never know where it's going to go. I always feel like a new joke is like a choose-your-own-adventure book where you start off on this page and then you go, jump over. I've got an idea for a joke on this other topic that's related to it, and then it becomes an actual thing with its own momentum. I know that sounds very pretentious, but, yeah, I do most of my writing on stage.
Oh, it's really fascinating. I've never heard that before. I think I heard Chris Rock once upon a time say he tours for 2 full years and wants to get something like 200 shows under his belt before he knows the special is ready. What about you, Jim? How long do you tour before you know, okay, this is a special, I'm ready to do this for an hour or whatever?
1 year. 1 year.
1 year.
But then sometimes, look, I always just put my best hour of jokes out. It doesn't matter if I've written the joke a year ago or if I've written it a week ago. If I've written it a week ago and it's storming, it gets into the special. I just burn it straight away because the special is the most important thing. I worry about tomorrow. I worry about tomorrow. You know what I mean? The specials are such like in this moment, this is the best I have to offer. So I really leave it all out there. And then I give myself a little bit of space afterwards to write a new show, or I have 20 minutes that I sort of like that isn't quite ready, and I try to build around that. The most stressful time in any comedian's life is the day after a special comes out and you walk on stage. That's a hell of a day, and you just smile through the whole thing and hope everything goes well. But often those shows go great because people can feel the creativity going on, or the spontaneous in the moment stuff. Sometimes you can have jokes and you do them for too long, and you lose the life behind your eyes when you tell a joke. You don't want to let it sit there for too long. It's like wine. There's a year you're meant to open that bottle.
When did you and how did you get the bug? Did you see somebody perform and said, I want to do that? Or did you have a favorite comic growing up? What hooked you to this craft, Jim?
Well, Eddie Murphy when I was a kid. See, I never got to see like George Carlin or Richard Pryor do stand-up because in Australia we didn't have HBO and we didn't have stand-up specials, you know. We had like occasionally you'd have an American or British comic who came out to Australia and they did 5 minutes on our late night show, but I never saw anyone do stand-up for more than 5 minutes on TV as a kid. And that except for Eddie Murphy's Delirious and Eddie Murphy's Raw, because they were cinematic releases so you could get them at the video store. So I rented out Delirious. I got my brother to rent out Delirious for me so many times because he was of age, and I watched it over and over and over and over and over again. And that was the comic I wanted to be. It was Eddie Murphy telling stories about his childhood and, you know, all that type of stuff. So Eddie Murphy was my favorite, but I always say to people who want to get into comedy, don't go see a big theater act. Go down to comedy clubs where you might see someone who's really bad. No one gives you more confidence in stand-up than someone who's really bad at it. So that's the moment where you actually watch it. You go, well, I can do better than that guy. You know what I mean? So luckily for me, stand-up comedy in the 90s in Australia was pretty weak. And, there were some very good comics, but there was a lot of weak ones out there. And I saw some people that I thought I might be better than.
Well, you're a heavyweight now, Jim. Do you ever get over a joke bombing on stage? Because I've seen thousands of stand-up shows, and I worked in L.A. for a year, so I used to go to the store after I was done recording my stuff. And so, to your point, I saw a lot of people workshopping material, and it's painful as an audience member when a comic tries a joke that just falls on deaf ears. Do you ever get over that, or is it something that's always in the back of your mind?
Immediately. In the early days, I didn't, but it's like any drug, right? The highs get lower and the lows get higher. You know, it's very hard to chase that buzz over and over again. So in the same way that I can have a standing ovation at the end of the gig and go, oh, I did okay, right? But early on in my career, I would have just been as arrogant as anything. I would have been thinking about how cool I was for days and days afterwards. But the flip side of that is if I bombed, I went into a fit of depression. I just laid in bed until I had to go back on stage again, or until I had to go to whatever job I was doing to pay the bills. But my self-worth was very tied in with how good I was at stand-up comedy. And as you get older and you have more and more good shows and more bad shows, more importantly, the bad shows don't bother you anymore because I'm confident enough to know that a good show is just around the corner. You know, so sometimes I'll be angry with the audience because I think, well, that was a good joke, and I've done that joke in other places and it's gone well, and why didn't it go well for you? And then sometimes most of the time I'm angry with myself when the gig doesn't go well because I think, yeah, I wasn't putting quite enough effort in, or I didn't get enough sleep, or something like that, you know. So there's a bit of blame game going on, but I don't let it bother me for too long.
When did you know you were good at this? When did you know when you walked out on stage, you thought, okay, I've got this. I'm good at this now. How long did that take?
It took me 4 years of doing it to think that I was a good comic, and then at about 6 years, I started to believe that, you know, not that I was a great comic, but I believed that there was no comic on earth that I was scared of following. You know, and that was the last hurdle. That was the last sort of Jedi Master thing where you're like, because there's always a comic where you go, oh, I can't go on after that person. That person's too good, and the audience will know how shit I am, or whatever. You know what I mean? Sorry for swearing there. But then there was a moment where I was like, no, I'm not scared. I can go on a bill with anybody in the world. And I still believe that to this day. And so I think that must be the same as like an athlete or something. When you start, you know, playing in the G League, you think you're a pretty good basketball player. But then when you're smashing it in the NBA, you think, all right, I must be good now.
I know you referenced some of the comics you liked when you were growing up. Who in the game right now do you enjoy? Like when you see they've released a special or a pod?
I think Anthony Jeselnik's last special was very good. I think the best special, though, that I've seen in the last decade, and it's only 30 minutes long, is Earthquake on Netflix. He released a 30-minute special that was presented by Dave Chappelle, and I was proper laughing at home, howling. You know, I thought that was really, you know what, it made me enthusiastic about stand-up. I loved that he went out there and the jokes were punch, 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 punch. It was just like being beaten up with jokes. They never ended. At the end of 30 minutes, I had to get my breath. And I was like, oh, you know, I can't do that. I linger on a joke too long. You know, I let there be a lot more air. It's a different style of comedy, but I really enjoyed his special. Yeah.
It feels like there's this boom of stand-up comedy now. Do you feel like that's podcast? Do you feel like that's social media? Why do you feel like there's been kind of this stand-up comedy boom where so many stand-ups are making good money now?
Well, I was a little bit before the boom. You know, I'm not, you know, my sort of peak ticket sales were maybe 6 years ago, something like that, when there wasn't really arenas. Now people are doing arenas. I think it's both good and bad. I've done a few arenas. I've probably done 15, 20 arena shows in my whole career, and they always go okay, but they're never as nice as about a 3,000-seat theatre. That's really comedy at its peak, where the audience still has a connection to the comedian, and you still feel like you're talking to a room full of people and not just delivering material like you're on a big screen. So I think these arena comics are good for comedy because they're bringing in a lot of new fans to comedy who probably haven't seen other shows. But I think people will get tired of the arena shows and enjoy. Once you've seen a comic once in an arena, I don't think you see him twice in an arena. I think you catch them the next time when they're in the 3,000-seater. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I feel like you're correct because it's much better to watch stand-up, in my opinion, in these smaller, more intimate venues. You kind of, intimated there. Hey, before I set you loose.
Well, a lot of people recorded comedy specials, and they did it like Madison Square Garden.
Right.
I always put my comedy specials in a 1,000-seater because I feel that's the most connected to the audience you can get, and that's the best sort of gig you can have with the cameras all in close. And I don't like the idea of a comedy club because I like a big stage to move around on. But I think for the specials, I always go to a smaller room because I think it's a better product to actually see on TV. Because the people watching your special on TV, they don't give a crap if you're in Madison Square Garden. or you're filling a baseball stadium or whatever. They don't care about that. They just want to see the material. So for the specials, you're really performing to the people at home, not the people in the arena. I think it's just people trying to show off a little bit. Look at how many tickets I've sold, And it is impressive, of course, but I don't know if it's the best thing to watch on telly.
Before I set you loose, one of the things that I always like about going, to see stand-up comics that have had great success like you is the knowledge. And Jim, if you don't have anything here, I get it because you're not coming to Salt Lake until February the 13th, but I always enjoy a humorous mirror to look at about our state, our city. What do you know about Salt Lake? We are a very interesting market, Jim, to say the least. What are you familiar with Salt Lake? What do you know about it?
I went to the Sundance movie festival once, and I think I've done one other gig in Salt Lake. Look. Back when I was a drinker, I thought your place was a bit silly, with all the different bars. But now that I'm sober, it might be my utopia. But I'm also not a big fan of anyone who lives. Not anyone. I could never live in the cold. If you have to get out of your driveway with a shovel, why would anyone want to do that? I grew up in Australia and I live in LA, so I don't know if I do have a lot to tell you. I've never skied in my life, but what I do is, with places like Salt Lake, I always come in the night before, and you normally get the story you get from the night before is whoever drove you from the airport and whoever worked at reception in the bar at the hotel. That's my reference point for each city. So if you got two nice people doing that, I reckon your city's great. And if you don't, I'm going to rip into you.
Fair enough. I think you'll experience only nice people here, Jim. But it's the Son of a Carpenter.
Sure I will.
Son of a Carpenter tour, February 13th at the Echo Center. Jim, where do you want people to go to get their tickets?
Go to jimjeffries.com and you'll just be able to click on a link there. It's on the front of the page. They'll have all my tour dates.
Thank you, sir. This has been a pleasure. I've been a fan for a long, long time, and I'm going to be there at the Echoes Theater. I cannot wait. So be safe and continue the great work, okay?
Make sure you come backstage and say hi afterwards, eh?
Oh, happy to do it. It would be an honor, Jim, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right, Jim Jeffries, Son of a Carpenter tour right now. Looks like he's going to be in Spokane, coming up in Denver for a couple of dates. He'll be here February the 13th at the Echo Center. He has his special right now on Netflix called High and Dry. The best special, in my opinion, that Jim released was in 2010. It was called Alcoholocaust. He's got a great bit on gun control. He has recorded 10 specials. He's going to record one in Chicago. And so, excited for that. I'll be there, and maybe I'll be backstage, apparently, which is awesome. All right, we'll catch a quick break. We're going to welcome in Mike Sanford Jr. coming up to do some college football. Call Ryan at the Dish Pros at 801-424-DISH, 801-424-DISH. Save money, support local. We're talking your wireless, we're talking your cable, and also your internet. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much as always. We love the amazing offers that we have. Guys, we hooked up this customer. He had existing fiber. He got that big rate increase, was spending about $80 a month. We're able to set him up with Quantum Fiber at $45 a month and took his TV bill down another $100 a month. Guys, this is a ton of money. Plus, we got him Netflix free for the next 2 years. Guys, this adds up pretty quick. Now you're talking, $150, $180 a month. You're saving. Guys, call us up. Take advantage of the deals. Dish's offer is fantastic because it has a price guarantee. You get huge credits for the next 2 years. You get Netflix, the ad-free version. Guys, that is worth a lot by itself. You get that free, and we'll have you installed and throw in dinner at JCW's. Now, there are special offers that Dish mails out to people. Now, if you ever get a mailer, maybe you didn't see it. Listen, we've got a new tool at our office, so if you call in, we'll actually search your account and see if you did receive one of those special offers, and we can stack that on top of that. And guys, this gets people $500, $600, $700 in savings just by calling up, saving money. Take advantage of the deals. We'll throw in dinner at JCW's, have you installed as early as next day. Call today, start savings. Don't procrastinate. Hey, listen, your bill went up, you're unhappy with your service, call now. 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Mike Sanford Jr. is going to join us to talk some college football coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Special thanks to Jim Jeffries. How about that, man? That was fun. I've been a fan of Jim's for like 15 years. I've watched all of his specials. And I got to be honest, if you watch Jim Jeffries' stand-up specials, he comes across as kind of a grumpy guy, maybe somebody who's not all that front-facing and very kind. He was great. He was lovely. I was a little bit taken back.
He's I'm going to go with direct. I'm going to go with direct because maybe I'm a little nihilist myself, so I'm with him on a lot of it. But it is you're on the right track there.
Did you just compare yourself to Jim Jeffries? I'm
not nearly as funny, but I am maybe as nihilist, I guess. Does that work?
Maybe you're the Jim Jeffries of Sports Talk Radio.
I don't know about that.
Jim will be in town February 13th, Eccles Theater, for his tour. Go to jimjeffries.com for tickets. Joining us now, another comic powerhouse, a very funny guy, mostly known for his football acumen, though, Mike Sanford Jr., back on the show on a Tuesday. Mike, happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm learning all kinds of stuff. The music that you guys had coming in and Jim Jeffries. I mean, I feel like I'm in an alternate universe. I need to get with the times.
Well, we've
learned get a little pop culture in me.
Well, you're a football guy. Football guys don't have pop culture knowledge. You know that because all you care about is football, which is good because I have a lot that I want to talk to you about today, Mike. I appreciate the time. Obviously, we have a national champ. It is Ohio State. You have coaching experience, so I wanted to ask you right out of the gates, what do you make of this wild ride that Ryan Day has been on for somebody that's been as successful as almost anyone who's ever done this job? Noise around him as little as like 3 or 4 weeks ago that he might be fired if he doesn't, at least go to the championship game. But here he is, the top of the mountain. What do you make of this Ryan Day storyline and the ride he's been on?
Well, I as a guy that grew up as a son of a coach and then also coached for 18, 20 years myself, having been a head coach, certainly the offensive coordinator position is a job that I occupied for almost a decade, and that one's highly scrutinized, and you're always under pressure to perform and to outperform, frankly, expectations every single year and even every single game. And, the more and more I've watched Ryan Day, and even my wife, who has a great read on people and, just seeing what he's made of, watching, interviews after losses, interviews after wins, he's a pretty likable dude. Like if you really break it down, he's never overly arrogant when they're winning. He's never one to make excuses for not beating Michigan, which has obviously been the biggest problem. I think he's a guy that is, frankly, in the coaching profession, he's become somebody easy to root for me. And there's a lot of these head coaches, I've worked for a few, to be really honest, that love to control the narrative, love to get into the spin zone as head coach and do everything in their power to deflect blame, and put it on to players or to coordinators. I just think Ryan Day has done a really good job as a coach, and I've been really impressed with him. And so I think that this is a testament. And I think the real MVP in all of this is actually my former athletic director when I was an assistant coach at Western Kentucky, is Ross Bjork, for him to stand up boldly and really put his chest out and neck out on the line a little bit, saying that this is my head coach, regardless of how things play out. And I think that goes a long way. And I think a lot of athletic directors and, frankly, a lot of head coaches in this industry right now that are just cowering to pressure could learn a little something about standing up for their people instead of just, hiding and ducking. There's a lot of cowardice in this industry. And I think that the Ohio State story of this year, from athletic director to Ryan Day, was actually a story of standing up for people during a tough time and a time of adversity, which was, frankly, just losing to Michigan. That was it. It was one game that really persuaded this thing and almost put it off the rails.
Can you give us a little bit of a frame of reference? Because I don't know that there are very many fan bases that would want their coach to be out, who's finished in the top 10 every single year and has won a tremendous percentage of his games, and more often than not is in the mix to win something special every single season. I mean, he has a better winning percentage than Jim Tressel. He has a better S&P than Urban Meyer, and he's one of 3 coaches who win a national championship now, and the 5th coach in Ohio State history won a national championship. What is it about a fan base like that has expectations that seem, Mike, to be so out of whack?
Well, I would say, just put it in a local context and just imagine if Witt was the perennial, 11, 12 win season every single year for a decade, or say in the case of Ryan Day, 6-7 years, but lost 5 straight years to the team down south, to the team in Provo. I mean, that's a real thing, and that's a real hated, bitter rivalry that your fan base sometimes maybe puts even above the overall success of the season. And I think as a result of some conference changing and the Mountain West and dissolving, and then it was independent for BYU and Pac-12 for Utah. You didn't really have that as a consistent storyline every single year. Now it's going to start entering back into the conversation with the Big 12. But I mean, you got to start those types of things really do matter, especially in football crazed places that have really high expectations. But those expectations sometimes are that one game means maybe more than all of them. And if you have a trend that is so consistent where you just cannot beat that team, and even when that team's not good, that's a problem. That's a major problem for a head coach to overcome. And I think people that are listening right now that are Utah fans, or even if you're a BYU fan and say Kalani's ripping off 12, 13 wins every year, including the college football playoffs and the Big 12 championship, but just can't beat Utah 5 years in a row, 3, 4, 5 years in a row, that becomes an issue in a place that really does care about a rivalry game like I do know that BYU and Utah do care about.
You hear a lot of talking heads like myself, media types, say like, oh, that Michigan loss was exactly what they needed. Any meat on that bone? I mean, as a guy that coach, is that like a wake? I mean, look, the results are what they are. And when we all diagnose and play Monday morning quarterback, it's easy to create a narrative like that. But is that a real thing in a locker room? Like you feel like maybe you needed a wake-up call?
I don't think it was from the perspective of motivation or that they were overconfident. I actually think it really freed up and almost forced Ryan Day and Chip Kelly to get out of a little bit of this Big Ten West football style of playing, which is just do everything in your power not to lose a game, which is how they lost that game to Michigan. I don't know if you remember that game in particular. It was as risk-averse of a game plan as that you will ever see. It was almost as if Will Howard was a quarterback that had leprosy, and they didn't want him to use his gifts as a passer because he had some type of dysfunction. He actually proved once they started unloading his abilities, and that started really as the playoffs started to unfold. Man, he looked really, really good. And I think the glow up, if you will, from the Michigan game to the very end of the college football playoff and culminating last night in the win over Notre Dame of Will Howard might have been the best in college football. He was playing at the end like as well as any quarterback in the country. In fact, I'm starting to second guess some of these draft narratives that it's a Shedeur, Sanders, and Cam Ward conversation. I'm like, this Will Howard dude, if he would have played like that all year, I don't know if that would have been the case.
Yeah, he was. He was great, and I do want to get there in just a moment. But let's stick with the current situation where we find ourselves, and let's move from Ohio State to Notre Dame. And Marcus Freeman, this wonderkin's rise. I mean, you were a coach. Can you imagine that your first head coaching job is Notre Dame at the age of 35? And obviously, that fan base expects as much from their football team as any other. What stands out, Mike, most to you as a guy that coached at this level with the way Marcus Freeman's been able to build this thing up over just 4 years at the precipice of almost winning a national championship?
Yeah, Marcus Freeman's been really impressive. I got to know him a little bit just because that's a place I was an offensive coordinator at. We had some crossover in terms of people that we've worked with. Mike Denbrock and I were a bit of a two-headed monster there as an offensive play calling tandem back in 2015 and 2016 at Notre Dame. My dad coached at Notre Dame. My sister graduated from there. So, I've lived there twice in two different stages of my life, and both as a kid and then as a working adult in the industry. And man, I'll be honest, this was a really impressive year from Notre Dame. Even the game last night, I think really stood tall with regards to how much they were willing to step into the fight of battling adversity, getting down early in games and, even overcoming the Northern Illinois loss and how they bounced back from that was all really, really good. Notre Dame is great in the trenches. Notre Dame is really good in their defensive, linebacker play, edge play, their offensive line play, tight end play, running back play. But there's just been a big problem, and I think it's because even in this NIL portal era, that we find ourselves in, Notre Dame, you have to go to school. You have to go to college. This is a traditional Catholic environment education that it's in-person education, and so many of these schools are going to just basically there's no college anymore. That's not the case in Notre Dame. So if you're going to transfer to Notre Dame, you have to realize that you're going to be going to a school where you have to stay eligible by actually going to a class. What a novel concept in collegiate athletics. Well, it sounds crazy, but that's so rare in this day and age because of everything post 2020, and then now in this NIL portal era, everything's just going online. It's online courses. Frankly, who knows who's actually doing the work? That's not the case in Notre Dame. And so I don't know that Notre Dame will ever have the skill players, and I know this is going to sound generally overly generalized, but the skill players to compete with like what Ohio State had. I mean, they had the receiver play, the DB play. It was a mismatch, and I just think that that's something that Notre Dame's going to have to deal with. I don't know that Notre Dame's going to win a national championship in my lifetime. Going forward, 1988 was the last one. I thought this was a great opportunity if they had gotten a turnover or two to maybe get one, just by way of – I just don't know if they can get back to this spot, and I don't know that they're going to have the opportunity to excel in this current landscape to the extent to win a title. They've been there, 3 times? 2014, I believe, 2013 national championship, lose to Alabama 42-14. And then they go and play Clemson, lose 30-3 in the college football playoff semi. And then they lose again, I believe it was to Georgia, 31-14. And then this one they lost by 11 points, but it just didn't feel very close. Notre Dame just haven't really stood up very well, very tall in these challenging games to win a national championship. I just don't see it happening.
So is there anything to be learned? It doesn't matter the sport or the level. When somebody achieves success, others around them try to learn what they did, and very much a copycat situation. The NBA copycat league. NFL, I mean, obviously there are different ways to approach it, but, if you could bottle what the Kansas City Chiefs have, namely 15 under center, maybe you try to copy that. So college football now looks to Ohio State as a North Star question mark to you, or anything we could learn helps to have 20, 25 mil, whatever they had. But a lot of that money, Mike, as you know, went to returning players instead of just transfers. And we're in a market where Coach Witt, as you know, is a recruit, develop, retain, win program. The best Utah football teams have been with upperclassmen who have been here for a while. Oftentimes recruits that weren't very highly thought of. And obviously, Ohio State's different because they get some of the best recruits every single year. But this was not just a team that entered the transfer portal to get 54 new players. They had a lot of players that were around for a long time. Some played more than 50 games. What can other roster constructors, if anything, learn from Ohio State?
Yeah, you have to develop and recruit and develop your offense and defensive lines, your linebackers, ideally your tight end position. It just seems like if you look at the matchup of the quarterbacks last night in that national championship game, they're 2 one-and-done, experienced quarterbacks. Riley Leonard comes over from Duke, and of course, Will Howard comes over from Kansas State. That's kind of the model, and I love what Utah's done with Devin Dampier. I think it's fantastic. But then, there's Quinn Ewers was in the Final Four, and you can look at him a little bit more like a Jake Retzloff, that he's been developed and been the starting quarterback for a couple of years at BYU. But if you're looking at Utah in particular, I think they do have the right pipeline, and I think the Polynesian, the island pipeline that they have for O-line, D-line, linebacker, other positions as well. I mean, we have Denver Broncos here. Devon Vele and Jonah Ellis are 2 awesome youths that I get a chance to watch on a weekly basis. But I just think that Utah has a good chance to do something pretty special this year. And you and I have talked about in shows in the past about I feel really good about Devin Dampier. But if you're looking at Ohio State in the model, it's the money. I mean, you got to be willing to raise and or support $25 million for if you want to go win a national championship. Hard part is that that's not a guarantee, because it sure as heck didn't look like it's a guarantee about week 12 of the college football season for Ohio State. And if you think about who are the people that are investing that kind of money, and if you're not getting return on investment, is that repeatable? Is there going to be some gets to be like some exhaustion from donor fatigue of giving money and not seeing return on investment. So there's a lot of challenges, and I think we're just starting to see some of the potential ramifications of how much money is being thrown into one season of college football.
So now that we have the 12-team CFP behind us, Mike, I wonder what your takeaways are as far as whether or not you like the format, whether or not you think it's going to need to be changed, and whether or not you think it will be changed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the one thing, Spence, I live in a pro sports market, but does have college football. I mean, between Colorado and even the run they made, they were close to being in the CFP at one point, week 11, week 12 of the season. Man, it just seemed like Monday night, even when I woke up Monday morning, it didn't feel like a national college football championship game day. Something seemed awry. And I don't know if it's that this thing bled too far into the NFL's postseason. That I live in a pro sports town. The NFL is king here for sure, and the NFL is king nationally. There's no doubt about it. Look at that Chiefs game that they had against the Texans. Drew 32.5 million viewers, which is an all-time record for ESPN for any game, any sport, any time of year. I just think that this needs to be moved up, because as much as the CFP accomplished what it set out to accomplish, I went to a CFP game. I went to see my alma mater, Boise State, play against Penn State. And while, it seemed like a great atmosphere, it just didn't, it didn't have the juice that I expected being in the building. It just felt like, I don't know. It's like, this is such a long process. I want to see the college football decision makers, and frankly, the TV money, I think, would be even through the roof if you move the season more into mid-August. And whether you start with a week 0, I still think that this Army-Navy week 0 only game on that weekend could be a really powerful weekend, because I don't believe that college football playoff and certainly the national championship should really be competing at all with the NFL playoffs and the NFL postseason. I think it's a big mess. I think there's a bandwidth issue, even for somebody like me that does sports for a living. The college football games, there was not any memorable moment, real memorable time, except for maybe the Arizona State-Texas game. But at the end of the day, was that like something you're going to remember the rest of your life? There was nothing out of this 12-team playoff that really stood out to me. I'd love to hear from you and your opinion, but it just didn't feel like it really captured the emotion of America in this first year of it.
So here's my assertion, Mike, and you tell me if you think this is even possible, because I believe college football should be played on college football campuses. And I mean like every single game, maybe outside of the final game. Joel Klatt's idea is to make the Rose Bowl college football's answer to the Super Bowl. Is there a way to reward teams in communities so they don't have to travel to Atlanta and then Dallas and then back to Atlanta or whatever, so you can play all of these games on college campuses? Because that would capture the passion you're talking about, and then save the final game of the season for what Joel Klatt believes should be the Rose Bowl, and preserve the bowls that are in place, because the bowls that are in place simply employ a lot of people. And they will not go away quietly. They want their place at the table because people want to keep their jobs. So that's my thing that I feel like not a lot of people have discussed. I think college football is meant to be played on college campuses. Is there a way they could pull that off?
I think there's certainly a way you could pull it off. I mean, you're going to deal with a lot of the weather issues and a lot of the excuse making. But at the same time, it's, if you want a home game, then you need to perform better in your regular season and in your conference play. I think there's an equity issue, even Notre Dame not having to be forced to play a conference championship game. There are some issues. You think about it, the teams that were in the national championship game last night didn't play in a conference championship game, right? Neither one did. So that's one less game. Because Ohio State, I believe the Big Ten championship game was Penn State and Oregon, correct?
Correct.
That's an extra game. So there is an equity issue in college football. I mean, Notre Dame is. I mean, that certainly stands out. They, no matter what, would not have to play in a conference championship game. But yeah, I mean, I think I like the idea, Spence. I do. If you do that, I think you really do have to move everything up a bit. I think you don't want 2-week breaks in this college football playoff, or even 10, 12-day breaks. I think you should just stick with whatever date, like Thursday, Friday, those are Thursday, Friday night, or that's when the college football playoff games are, and it's every 6-7 days. Boom, 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 and just let it go, so that people can know when the games are on. It feels like there's some type of schedule. I mean, I found myself just, hey, when are the games? When are the college football playoff games? And they were like, is it before the NFL playoffs, or the NFL weekend? Is it after? Whatever it is, it just needs consistency. I like home games. There was something a little bit strange. Like, I loved all the buildup to having college football playoff games on home sites. Like the Notre Dame Indiana game was like beautiful to see, but when the game started, it just didn't feel like a playoff game to me, Spence. I don't know why. You can agree. We can agree to disagree, but just watching it, it didn't feel like the magnitude of a playoff game like the NFL like captures. Like, you feel that, and I don't know what that is. I don't know. Maybe it's just year one of it, but I don't know what was the issue this year. It just didn't feel like it was as exciting as it could have been.
And I'm with you there. And, certainly I think because there are a lot of people that just they belong to the church of college football, and they're going to love it no matter what. And, the fact that it was 77,000 people, the cheapest ticket, according to Matt Brown, who joined us from Extra Points, was $3,000. We haven't seen the final number, but I bet it's over 20 mil. All of those numbers, Mike, indicate that you and I can debate about what they need to change, and they can send us their P&L statement and say, tell us what we need to change. This feels like, for the people that are in charge of making decisions, this first iteration of the 12-team CFP was a massive, massive success.
Yeah, I mean, did you see some of the ticket prices, though, on, like, for example, some of the, I guess it'd be the second round and third round games that were traditional bowls, like the Fiesta Bowl, for example. I mean, I ended up going to the Fiesta Bowl, and I worked as a credential member of the media for the Boise State media, and so I didn't pay for tickets, but I wanted to bring my family, and the original ticket prices were like $350, something along those lines, to buy through the athletic department, the official allotment. Well, then I checked ticket prices the day before the game for, this is Penn State we're talking about. Penn State, Boise State, and Boise State travels really well. I mean, these tickets were in the $18 to $30 range on the aftermarket. And then you show up to the game, and there's full corners of the Fiesta Bowl that are completely empty. And so I think that, yes, the national championship game, I think you hit because you got Notre Dame, you got Ohio State. These are two fanatical fan bases, and wildly, Ohio State's won. This was their third national championship since 1968. I don't know if you realize that. I mean, you think of Ohio State as a perennial national champion team, 3 in that time frame. That's pretty wild. Notre Dame has not won one since 1988. So this was a big moment in time for both those programs that have very passionate fan bases. But I was surprised by just some of the lack of just sheer excitement, certainly for some of the second and third round games of the college football playoff.
Mike, before I set you loose, I know we have talked about this before, but a great radio mind once told me radio is not linear. So for our listeners that may not have been tuned in, I wanted to revisit your opinion on Jason Beck as a new offensive coordinator. You referenced you like Devin Dampier as well, and Utah football bringing in 41 new players with a 53% roster turnover after a year that nobody saw coming, including me, including you, including them, right? So what are you expecting next year, year 2, Big 12 Utah football?
Well, I'm really excited about the hire of Jason Beck. He has a great familiarity of the state of Utah. He understands, what that program at Utah is all about, and he's been on the other side of that rivalry with BYU, of course. But I got to know Jason. I called a couple of his games. Followed his team really closely. I did the CSU versus New Mexico game, which frankly was probably one of their worst games. They had a pretty banged up roster with missing a ton of their skill players. But I'll tell you this, schematically, he's one of my favorite coaches in college football today. And I think it's a combination of really creative shift in motion and the trick plays. But also it's a quarterback-driven run game. And Devin Dampier is about as good as you can find, both in the QB-driven run game and then the play actions off of that. I just love what Jason Beck does. I also think he does a really good job of keeping it as simple for his own personnel in this transfer portal turnover the roster era.
so that you can go out and learn this offense, and it's easily ingested and then easy to go execute. But it's really difficult for teams to defend. And that's something that I saw. And I think that that's the secret sauce in this day and age. A lot of people run an offense in a box like the air raid or certainly like the Art Briles Baylor system that, Lane Kiffin's running and the University of Tennessee with Josh Heupel's running. I think those systems are pretty easy to defend if you don't have elite personnel everywhere. And I think that what Jason Beck does is he gives enough eye candy, enough misdirection, and just the threat of the trick play week by week that it does keep defenses really much on their toes and they're guessing. And so I'm really excited about Jason Beck. I think he's a great man. I think he's going to be a great fit. And, hey, I'm just going to throw a little bit of my advice, not that it's necessarily desired or not, but you got a really good offensive coordinator there at University of Utah. So let him cook. And I'm talking fans. I'm talking head coach. I'm talking defensive coordinator. Let Jason Beck be a really good offensive mind and stay out of his kitchen. Let the man cook.
Oh, Mike, I guess you've never met college football fans. I love the message, but you know how they, and you know what's rough, man? It's always the OC, isn't it? It's always the offensive coordinator that falls on the sword.
But you know what? It's that way in the state of Utah, and I love the state of Utah. I love coaching in it. I was the offense coordinator at Utah State. There definitely is a culture, defensive-minded head coaches at most of the schools in that state. Certainly, like you look at the history over the last couple of decades since Urban Meyer was at Utah. There's a lot of meddling with the offensive coordinator position. Let the man coach, and he will do a great job. That's my advice to anybody who wants mine. Yeah, and so I would give that unsolicited.
Well said, and we do want your advice because you've coached. Okay, so I appreciate the time, my friend. Have a great week. We'll get you back on soon.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Spence.
All right. Mike Sanford Jr., longtime college football coach, played his college ball at Boise State, where he's a good quarterback. Appreciate Mike's time doing the media rounds these days. At Coach_Sanford2 is where you find him. All right, before we launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program, new year, new you, new budget, save money. Save money with your internet. Save money with your wireless situation. And, of course, save money on your cable TV situation, too, by dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yeah, call us up and see what kind of deals we can hook you up with. Guys, a lot of offers out there. Dish does send out individual offers to your house. And, guys, if you got one of those, a little kind of a white envelope says Dish, open it up. It's a special offer just for you. If you maybe thought you got one, call us up. We can check and see. But, guys, this goes on top of the promotion that we already have, which is unbelievable. You've got the best offer out there, 2 years worth of credits, big credits, movie channels. You get a price guarantee so it doesn't change. Now, that's a big deal. The price increases that we've seen in 2024 were huge, 20% in a lot of areas. And this goes all the way down even to the internet side of it. Listen, call us up. If you got a big increase in your cable, DirecTV, your fiber, or even YouTube TV, if you didn't notice that monster increase, call us up because the more are coming. You're going to see more of this next year. We can get you an offer that's cheaper than what you're currently paying and lock in that price for 2 years. Plus, I'll throw in Netflix free for the next 2 years because this is a huge offer worth $370 plus. Plus, we'll also throw in dinner at JCW's. Guys, I got fiber internet in certain areas at $35 a month. Quantum fiber, wherever that's available, I've got that at $45 a month. If you're spending $70, $80 a month for your internet, or you've got a cable bundle, we see this every day, $200+ a month for TV and internet. Call us. Let's lower that down, save you hundreds of dollars a month, thousands and thousands of dollars by simply picking up your phone. It's free money. You just got to call us. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Bros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the drive. Excuse me, the 5 o'clock hour of the drive is next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, what is going on? Drive at 5 time on a Tuesday afternoon. It is chilly. It is cold. This cold front is set in over the past 3-4 days, but as it is every single day, it's going to have you along for the ride. Commute home on a Tuesday starts right now. We're going to have Matt Brown, Extra Point, stop by. He was on the ground in Atlanta last night for the college football national championship game. Ohio State is your national champ, your first national champion in the new age, the new era of college football. 12-team expanded CFP comes to a close last night. Notre Dame made it interesting at the end. This game, to me, felt like it was over at halftime. And Ryan Day, what a great redemption story. What a ride it's been for him. All right, time now for your chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball team. We're going to make some dreams come true in the 5 o'clock hour. We had Jim Jeffries on earlier. Jim is one of my favorite stand-up comics. I've long been a fan, dating back to his first special in the United States back in 2010 called Alcoholocaust. The Son of a Carpenter tour is coming your way to the Eccles Theater here in Salt Lake City on February the 13th. But before we get to that, text Utes to 33986 to enter to win Utah men's basketball tickets. That's Utes to 33986 to enter for Utah men's basketball tickets. And your chance to win 2 tickets to see the great Jim Jeffries at the Eccles Center in Salt Lake City. Text in your favorite Jim Jeffries special, okay? He's about to record his 10th. There are 7 that have been recorded here in the United States. His newest one is still up on Netflix. He released it last year. Text that now to 33986. No, you're texting Utes to 33986. Text in your favorite Jim Jeffries stand-up special. 877-353-0700. See, you didn't think I had all that information stored in my dome. You thought I was going to confuse the text line with the number, but I was able to get my way through.
I'm impressed. 877-353-0700.
Favorite Jim Jeffries stand-up special. We'll send one of you with a pair of tickets to go see Jim Jeffries coming up at the Eccles Theater on February the 13th, right before Valentine's Day, if you're into such things. Maybe your partner likes Jim Jeffries, so text in. And we'll send one of you to go see Jim Jeffries and one of you to go see the Utes by texting Utes to 33986 to enter for Utah men's basketball tickets. Utah men's basketball was set to play tonight, but it has been postponed to tomorrow. Afternoon at 4 o'clock is when they're going to tip. So our show will end about 3:30 tomorrow. We'll send it over to Riles and our buddy Sean Mooney for a tough tilt. If you have not watched Houston play basketball this year, they're a Final Four contending team. They're a national championship contending team. Utah men, of course, they've won 3 straight games. Most recently, Brigham Young. It's Saturday at the Huntsman Center. So now Utah faces a really, really, really difficult task. Houston has not lost at home in 21 games, I believe. And then they're 6-0 in conference play. They're 14-3 overall. That's the number 7 team in the country as of now. And this would be, quite frankly, a massive upset for Utah basketball. Your early line is Houston minus 17.5. Utah men have won 3 straight games. The Houston Cougars are a 17.5 point favorite. That over-under is 133.5. The women will be in action following the men. They welcome in Kansas to the Huntsman Center, so head on up and support them. The Jazz are off tonight after losing a couple of games in the Big Easy. They're going to take on the best team in the West, maybe the best team in the NBA tomorrow, OKC. That's a 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Tilt the Utah Hockey Club, a couple of straight wins at home, luckily, because they were able to capture their final couple of wins before they go back out on the road. On Thursday, they will be in Minnesota. In case you missed it, we had a little breaking news on the show earlier. Real Salt Lake has added a keeper. Zach McMath is having surgery. He's out for about 4 months. Gavin Beavers has been loaned to a club. Let's see, that was a Dutch club. The name is escaping me. RSL has added a Brazilian keeper named Rafael Cabral, 10-year veteran of European football. He is 34 years old. He is under contract at least through next season, and the club will have options for 2027 and 2028. Of course, we'll get an RSL guest on in the coming days to talk about that. We've had a really, really busy show. Some breaking news in the 5 o'clock hour is Ichiro Suzuki, the first Japanese-born player in the history of baseball to be voted into the Hall of Fame. He'll be joined by CeCe Sabathia and Billy Wagner. So a little Hall of Fame news on the baseball side of things today. One eye ahead to conference championship weekend. Of course, we are your home for the biggest and best football games, whether it's college or pro in the market. So the Commanders and the Eagles on Sunday at 1 o'clock. That's your NFC Championship. Philadelphia is favored by 6. And then your later game will be the Chiefs hosting the Bills. Second straight year, these two teams will play for the right to go to the Super Bowl at Arrowhead. Kansas City is an early 2-point favorite. Of course, one eye ahead to the NFL. Only 3 football games left before it says goodbye for a number of months. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. If you're looking for expert skin care, Dr. Michael and Dr. Jason Hadley, along with their skilled team, offer a full range of dermatology services, such as anti-aging, body sculpting, how about that, laser treatments, injectables, and more. Whether it's general dermatology, advanced Mohs surgery for skin cancer removal, or cosmetic treatments, you're in great hands. Give them a call at 801-657-5664 or visit HadleyDermatology.com. You can schedule your appointment today. I've known these two for basically 25 years, 2 of my best friends. They'll give you great deals, and they've got a full range of dermatology services. If you haven't been in for a checkup, luckily Jason's my guy, so he has me in every couple years because I play a lot of golf. And it's kind of a nice new lease on life when he sends me on my way and tells me to wear my sunscreen, but tells me I'm good. So they're both certified dermatologists. It's Dr. Michael Hadley, Dr. Jason Hadley, with a passion for skin health. General dermatology covers any condition affecting the skin, the hair, and the nails, and encompasses a wide variety of diseases and disorders. You can find all your skin care solutions in Bountiful, West Point, Clearfield, and Roy. So dermatology providers at Ogden Clinic provide both medical and surgical solutions for common skin conditions, and they see patients of all ages. Here's the deal. Give them a call at 801-657-5664. That's 801-657-5664, or online at HadleyDermatology.com. All right, coming up next, Matt Brown, the editor of Extra Points, one of my favorite college football newsletters, was on the ground in Atlanta last night. We'll talk some Ohio State, Notre Dame. We'll talk some Big 12 and Utah and BYU and some college football before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon right here on ESPN 700. All right, final segment of the program on a Tuesday afternoon/evening, a chilly, cold, January Utah Tuesday. I've got to say, Porter, when Jim Jeffries said, how do you live in a place that cold when you have to exit your driveway with a shovel? Mm-hmm. I felt that. I know you're a lifelong Utahn, and you were raised in conditions that make Salt Lake City feel like Oahu. But this time of year, when it's like this, I'm kind of ready for a little sun.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but we don't even have any snow.
Yeah,
it's cold.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And you know what? To your point,
it's snowing in New Orleans right now.
I would prefer snow and weather a little bit warmer than simply just frigid like this. You're not wrong there.
Yeah, when it's just like dry and bad air and 8 degrees, I'm out on that. If it's Here's the thing: if you're getting a lot of snow, it's usually like 30 degrees, so it's not so bad. But now, if I could, I would love to live on the coast, on the ocean. But more to it.
We have, let's see here. You know what? I'm going to have to dig into what just dropped. The Phoenix Suns are trading their 2031 unprotected first-round pick to the Utah Jazz for 3 first-round picks. The Suns are acquiring the least favorable of the 2025 Cleveland, Minnesota pick, the 27 pick of Cleveland, Minnesota, and Utah, and the 29 pick of Cleveland, Minnesota, Utah. All right, so this is just coming down, drinking through a fire hose. My best guess, this means the Jazz are consolidating their first-round picks. Yeah, it's just a pick consolidation as far as, wanting to add multiple players. I'm thinking in real time as far as – so instead of adding 3 players in the draft in 25 – instead of adding 3 players in the draft in 25, 27, and 29, they're now adding 2. And they're consolidating those picks for roster construction, probably keeping salary in mind. And they're going to get a 2031 unprotected pick from Phoenix. So instead of adding 3 young players that you don't know anything about and then having to pay them guaranteed salaries, first-round picks get guaranteed contracts. My first look at this and my first analysis of it is they're simply consolidating the picks, so they add 2 players, not 3, in those drafts, 25, 27, 29. Well, okay, breaking news. We'll get to this certainly coming up on the show tomorrow. We'll break it down, but the Jazz just made a trade right before we say goodnight. Final thing, Porter, I love me some golf.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that COVID turned me into a bit of a golf addict, and I like playing. I like watching. I love the challenge of trying to get better. And currently on the men with this rotator cuff. But I am lost that what seems to be millions of people spend their evenings watching pro golfers play on golf simulators.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I know this is an ESPN product. I know it's Tiger. I know it's like got to be all in on it. I'm not. I haven't missed Tiger Woods golf literally since I was like in pull-ups.
Wow. You used to watch Tiger golf in diapers.
Absolutely.
Good for you.
This was only a few years ago, of course, but
I might be doing that in 10 years based off the direction I'm going.
But I'm not with it, man. Golf is, and I know that you're not supposed to resist change, but when it comes to the sport of golf, there's just so much tradition. There's so much that you're used to. And the teams, the virtual stuff, the indoor thing, it's not doing it for me. It seems like golf's answer to a generation of people with ADHD, which I'm understanding of. I get it. You got to entertain the masses, but this one just doesn't do it for me. And part of it, Spence, is I saw a hole the other week that Tiger played, and he hit this. You could tell the swing was pure. The contact was solid. The ball went straight right at the screen, but on the simulation, it like veered completely off the. It was like in the water shot. It was very clear that the simulator malfunctioned. Tiger Woods did not, and to me, like that's where I'm like, all right, I'm out. People are gambling on this. And you're basing it off of a simulating computer that I've seen in person malfunction a bunch of times because I've played with them before. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't see that part of it, but you're not wrong. But it seems like millions of people are watching this thing. All right, I'm going to have to dig into this Jazz trade because, like I said, it feels like it's pick consolidation, and they don't want to add 3 instead of 2. They may have done the calculation that Cleveland's going to be good for a long time, Minnesota's going to be good for a long time, and they're probably banking on Phoenix hopefully being bad in 2031. But the Jazz have essentially traded 3 first-round picks for 1 first-round pick that's unprotected, which is always a massive deal in pro basketball. It comes from Phoenix in 2031. So give me some time. I'm learning this in real time. It feels like a lot to consolidate, but you want more bites at the apple, or do you just want quality over quantity? We'll break it down. All right, let's get out of here. I'll be on TV with Dave Fox tonight, talking Jazz, actually, at 10:35 on KMYU. I need to get the yolk out of my beard. I had a little egg sandwich today and rushed into work, so I'm going to go home and shower, which is appropriate. Porter, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the show?
On a very abbreviated edition of the show, we'll only be on air for 45, 50 minutes or so. We will react to that trade that you just discussed. And yeah, consolidating picks maybe for trying to get a lottery pick. Seems like you banked on T-Wolves, Cavs being bad, and they're not exactly that. So maybe recalibrating a little bit. Zach Harper will dive into that with you. And then a little Utah Hockey Club, our weekly chat with Neil Smith behind the glass.
We are on air for 90 minutes tomorrow. Then we'll say good afternoon for Utah and Houston. I'm excited for that game. We'll see how the Utes can handle one of the best teams in the country. So join us for a Wednesday drive. With that, we'll say goodnight. Special thank you to Roxy Byrne. I almost said, to Roxy Bernstein. I'm not going to tell you what I almost just said. Thank you, Roxy, for joining us. Roxy Bernstein, ESPN. Thank you, Matt Brown, for joining us. Stand-up comic Jim Jeffries, who's at the Eccles Theater on February 13th. Stop by. Mike Sanford Jr. Stop by. If you missed any of the sound from the show today, you can go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store, the Google Store. And finally, for what we do in our space for 4 hours every afternoon, check out our podcast page. It is entitled The Drive with Spence Checketts. Go there on your preferred podcast catcher. Be nice to us, please. Say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It actually does help. For Porter, our station mascot, Duke, I'm Spence Checketts saying good night. Enjoy your Tuesday evening. We'll talk to you on an abbreviated Wednesday drive right here.